Okay, we will convene the Budget Committee for the Oregon City Commission for Monday, May 6, 2019. It is 5:32. Call a roll. And do you want to do introductions first? Or you want to do that after the roll call?
After roll call, please, Mayor.
Call the roll, please.
Committee Member William Gifford.
Here.
Committee Member Rachel Lyles-Smith.
Here.
Committee Member Joanne McCall.
Here.
Committee Member Denise McGriff.
Present.
Committee Member Timothy Christopher.
Here.
Committee Member Ray Gordon.
Here.
Committee Member Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
Committee Member Josh Planton.
Here.
And Chair Dan Holliday.
Here.
I think you missed.
I'm also
Commissioner
here.
Smith.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Commissioner.
Commissioner Smith, are you here?
I'm here.
So sorry. I don't know why I didn't start with you.
Okay. So next we need to elect a chair.
Mayor? If I
Yes.
if I
Okay,
could.
go ahead.
Thank you very much. Just wanted to welcome everyone to the 2019-2021 Budget Committee for approval of the Oregon City biennial budget. I'm Wyatt Parno, the Finance Director for the City of Oregon City. And what I want to do is just two quick things. I wanted to start with some special introductions and then just get into the agenda and go through that really quickly so we're all on the same page of what we're trying to accomplish today. Oregon City is fortunate to have Budget Committee members that are so highly qualified. Joining our mayor and city commissioners, we have 5 citizen committee members, including business owners, finance and technology managers, marketing and tourism managers, and also famous musicians, folks with master's degrees, and even a member that's spent 35 years as a finance director who gives me lots of tips as we're working through this process. So to start things off, I think it would be great just to have each of the budget committee members of the citizen members just give a brief introduction, tell who you are, a little bit about your background, and why you're on the budget committee. Starting with our new member, Josh Planton.
Thank you, Wyatt. My name is Josh Planton. I am born and raised in Oregon City. Family has lived in Oregon City since 1904, so been here quite a while. Still have lots of family in town. I have a double major in political science and finance from Linfield College. Currently, I work at a company that focuses on business consulting for technology conglomerates, where I oversee budget management, financial controls, and investment strategy for multi-million-dollar technology associations.
Hi. I should be standing and dancing around.
That mic's only good for the video.
Oh, it's only good for the video?
Yeah, so just leave it there and talk
Thank you, sir.
loudly.
My name is Ray Gordon. I've been an Oregon City resident since 2005 when I moved here to take a position with Clackamas County Tourism. I'm currently now a full-time musician and part-time Main Street manager for West Lynn Historic Willamette.
My name's Tim Christopher. I've lived in Oregon City since 2001. I'm born and raised here in Oregon. I have my undergraduate from Eastern Oregon in philosophy, politics, and economics, and my master's in political science from Portland State.
Good evening. I'm Denise McGriff, and I'm the newest, I'm the junior city commissioner on the commission. I just was recently appointed. I've lived in Oregon City since 1988, and I can one-up you because my family has been here since 1874 in Clackamas County. So, they go way back. Anyway, I'm retired and enjoying myself as a retired person. I formerly worked in local government for many years as a planner, as a project manager, and most recently with the Portland Development Commission, where I did business recruitment, business retention, small business loans, and just all sorts of general stuff. And I'm looking forward to this process. I got to do this many years ago when I worked for the city. So I'm on the other side of the table.
I'm Joanne McCall. I live here in Oregon City since 2002. I retired from Multnomah County as a budget analyst, and prior to that I worked for the city of Olympia. I've got about 35 years in finance. So that's it.
I'm William Gifford. for those that don't know me, I get involved in a lot of things. In addition to the city's budget committees, I'm on the Fire District Budget Committee, on the Water and Environmental Service Budget Committee, Chamber of Commerce Government Economic Affairs Committee, pretty actively involved in neighborhood associations. I don't know, how much do you want to know?
That's enough.
Okay.
Thank you, Committee Member Gifford. And for folks that are interested in learning more about the city commissioners, you can tune in on the first and third Wednesdays of each month for their business committee meetings. And you can also on the second Tuesday of the month are the...
Get a couple people.
No, we were just talking about the new budget committee citizen members and the extra special city commission members.
As opposed to the not extra special.
They're special too. I would also like to point out some folks in our audience. Thank you all for coming to hang out at our budget committee meeting. Really appreciate you having you here. And then also back here we have the department heads and managers that worked really hard to put together their budgets. The staff, the managers, department heads all did a fantastic job working with finance and following the city manager's direction to keep costs down this year, to absorb some of the things that we had to and add some to other things of our goals. And then finally, I want to introduce my teammates over here in finance. Maria McElveen is the deputy director. She's primarily the one responsible for making sure this budget book is an award-winning document and all the pictures and good narratives in there. That's Maria, so it keeps us all from falling asleep. Thank you, Maria. And next to her is Ryan Bradyhoff. Ryan did a lot to quality control, check the budget. He also worked with Public Works to pull their budget together and does a lot on their capital budget. And you might know Ryan as the project manager who implemented our enterprise resource planning system this last year. And that was a really successful project. So thank you, Ryan.
A successful IT project in government. How often does that happen?
It happens in Oregon City, man. Thank you. And also, Erin Wilkie is our senior accountant. She supported preparation of the Urban Renewal Agency budget, which all of you will look at next week. And she also did a lot to help us spot check the budget and kept operations going smoothly while we were all, hey, let's get this budget done. So thank you all for being here. I just want to quickly go through the agenda so everybody knows the roadmap that we have. You should have the agenda for tonight's meeting in front of you. As soon as I'm done, we're going to elect a chairperson and a secretary. That's required under Oregon law. The secretary position is nothing to be afraid of because the city recorder's office does all the work to pulling together the minutes, but it is required to elect one under law. But don't be shy about taking that position. There's no huge requirements. Then there'll be a public comment period, and we are required to hear public comment for the budget process, also under Oregon law, if anyone wants to comment, and the committee can set the rules that they choose. And then our city manager will talk about the city commission goals. We'll approve the minutes from the last budget committee meeting because this group meets every 2 years. It doesn't actually take us 2 years to put together the minutes. It's just that we haven't met for a couple of years. And then Tony Conkle, city manager, will present the budget message, at which time we will legally be able to deliberate on the budget. And then we'll review the budget by section. And Tony and Maria and I met this year and talked a little bit about what we could improve from last year. And so we've decided to break up the message into a little bit of make it a little shorter and more concise to allow more time for deliberation. So the city manager's budget message presentation is going to be shorter than last year. And then as we go through the budget section by section, Tony will give a brief summary of each section, and then that will lead into deliberation. So I think we'll be doing less talking this year, right? That was your goal. And then one more point that we have to take care of is there's a state requirement that we have a public hearing on state revenue sharing. I'll talk about that when we come to it. And then on the very back page are 2 recommended motions. Of course, those could be edited by the budget committee, but 2 things that we must do as a budget committee to approve the budget is to approve the budget in its total amount and also to approve a tax rate for each of the 2 years of the biennium. That's required under law. So that's our agenda, and with that, I'll turn it back over to the mayor for election of a chairperson. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, so we're going to do an election of chairperson, and I'm going to add a section here. We're going to also elect a vice chair, just in case I can't make it through the meeting tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will open the nominations for chair of the budget committee.
I nominate Mayor Holliday.
I'll second it.
Further nominations? Hearing none, nominations are closed. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, so I'm going to nominate Commissioner President Frank O'Donnell as the vice chair.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Further nominations? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we elect a secretary, and this is sort of ceremonial, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So anybody want to volunteer to be secretary?
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Rocky Smith.
I'll second that. Further nominations? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Moving on. So at this point, we have scheduled for public comments. Katie, do you have anybody that wants to speak?
Yes.
Okay.
Just giving their comments.
Okay. So we'll start with Heidi McKay.
Just right here.
Now come up to the main microphone so we can get your audio on the television feed.
Can you hear me?
The mics aren't only for the television, so you're just going to need to speak up.
Got it. My name's Heidi McKay. I'm a local resident of Oregon City and have been for 10 years. I moved to Oregon City because it's the land of opportunity. Everything's cheaper, houses-wise. So anyway, we moved here and fell in love with a historic home and have renovated it completely and really just settled into the neighborhood. The increase in crime, the homelessness, Father's Heart being so close has increased crime in our neighborhood substantially. And we've come together as neighbors, we've painted our intersection, we've tried to establish ourselves as people who live in this neighborhood, and this isn't a place for crime to happen. But there isn't a lot of walkability, believe it or not. I mean, it is a walkable neighborhood, but you don't see a lot of people out of their homes. It's kind of a bedroom community. So I'm trying to establish our neighborhood as a place where people come out of their homes, where community happens, where people come together physically and say, oh, you just live down the street. I'll totally help you out with your kid or dogs or whatever. Like, let's help each other. And there aren't opportunities or places for that. The library is a place for that, but I'm talking about where children can run free and families can feel confident and safe. And so anyway, this park would mean so much to our McLaughlin neighborhood community. Other than the library park, we don't have a good playground in our community. We have to drive our children to a playground. I don't know if there's any questions or you want me to keep going. I can go all day long.
More specific on the park?
What park?
Oh, so this is Lauderette Park. This is where the original pool was, and it was filled in the 1970s, and basically it's been neglected ever since. That's a long time for a park to go neglected. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Kate Burig.
Hi, I'm Kate Burig. I'm here on behalf of Lauderette Park. What I've really enjoyed about working with the community is the amount of community and teen involvement throughout this entire process. Then they've all been very involved with the park project. Also, one of my friends has a brother who is disabled, and the plans for this park include an ADA ramp and wheelchair accessibility, which his mother was very, very excited to hear about and very thrilled. So, yeah.
Thank you. Karen Burig.
Thank you, committee members. I'm really excited to be able to speak with you this evening. I'm speaking in support of the including Lauderette Park as a part of the parks budget this year. This is a project that the community and the local residents, as well as a group of local Girl Scouts, has been involved in for over 3 years. The local Girl Scouts, when they saw their park and not very many people playing in it, they came to the city and said, what are the plans for the park? And they didn't have any plans, and they said they know that needs to be invested in, but but they didn't know what the community wanted. So the girls did a great job of doing some engagement events, finding out what the community wanted, working with some local nonprofit groups to find out and actually do some community planning. The girls were able to access the community enhancement funding opportunity to pay for those community enhancement or the community engagement events. And from those events, a core team of neighbors really has been carrying this project forward. I think it's important to know that we've worked with the National Park Service, who has done that helped us out do an online survey about how we actually make this great vision into something that was practical. And so we also worked with an organization called DPAVE to help start making a visible difference in the park. And most recently, we were able to work and get funds to resurface the basketball court, and we were awarded a Nike grant to be able to do that. So we've been working really hard to bring money to this park, but during this whole process, it really was shown that in order for us to be able to redevelop and revitalize the upper portion of the park, that it does need to be accessible to everyone. And making that investment to be able to make it accessible for everyone is actually a really big lift. It's an important piece of maintenance that needs to happen in this park is to be able to have not just a ramp within the park, but being able to, if you've ever been there, just the corner access, even the curb cut, you wouldn't be able to roll a wheel trailer over it. And if you have problems walking, it would be very hard. So we've been working in partnership with the Parks Department. We received a community enhancement grant last round to be able to do the construction drawings to help us understand what the costs are. The time is right now to be able to invest in this park because it is all ready to move forward. So I guess the last thing, I've been really pleased with being able to connect with the youth in Oregon City and be able to let them see how they can be involved in their community. This is really important to me. They've been able to learn and be involved. And even tonight, I know that I've never been to a budget committee meeting, and they're able to see actually, hey, this is how your city is funded. So thank you all for being here tonight, and I look forward to hearing the outcomes of tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, last chance, if anybody wants to say something.
Go ahead. Yeah. Sorry.
Adrian Crockett.
Yes, thank you for letting me speak. Sorry I'm a little late. You just look up I'm just going to read it to you. I hope that's okay. I'm a relative newcomer to Oregon City. I have lived here with my husband and 2 children for almost 3 years now. My daughter is 5 and my son is 2, and we live in the McLaughlin neighborhood. When we were looking for a place to live in the southeast metro area near my husband's work, we were drawn to Oregon City because of its charm, history, public school Spanish immersion program, and access to the river and other beautiful natural areas. So far, we love living here and are committed to making it the best place possible for our children, and all of us, really. There are fantastic parks in Oregon City. We frequent them all. The library is our favorite place, and we love riding the elevator to wander Main Street. We enjoy kayaking at Clackamas Park and walking around the ELC at CCC, and also attending the farmers market. However, our biggest challenge since moving here has been making connections with people and feeling like we are part of the Oregon City community. Even though we frequent many of the fantastic public places in Oregon City, we haven't met many people in our neighborhood. We know there are kids around. We see their bikes and their toys. We just don't see them. Maybe it's because they don't really have any place to go in our specific neighborhood. There is not a neighborhood school. We used to run into families at the OC High School track, but it is now closed to the public. Therefore, our community meeting place should be DC Latourette Park, which, let's be honest, in its current state is hardly a park and might even be called an eyesore. I have to admit, it was the first park I looked up when we were moving into the area, and it wasn't very promising. Is the park in its current state really the first park we want people to see when they visit our lovely city? Fortunately, the local Girl Scouts had a vision to improve the park. And now my children might have a meeting and playing space we can walk to on a weekly basis and connect with our neighbors. I don't think I need to go into the benefits of exercise, outdoor nature play, and community connections to physical and mental health, because I think I might just be preaching to the choir. This is a worthwhile and necessary project. Make Oregon City even better. Please fund our neighborhood park.
Okay, so this is the last chance. If anybody wants to say anything before we go into the budget hearing, now is the time.
And Mayor, I would just like to submit for the record at this time that we did receive an email that I sent to all of you, and if you didn't have the opportunity to open it, I'm going to go ahead and read it into the record now.
Okay.
This came from Brian Shaw, Oregon City Together. It says, "Good morning. As you pursue the budget today, please keep in mind our request to use 10% of the marijuana dispensary revenue for prevention programs in the school district. We have seen use increasing at the middle school level while the perception of harm is decreasing. Thank you."
What we talked about earlier today. Did you find anything?
I done it, yeah.
Okay. All right, then we're moving on. I can find my agenda. So, going to do a review of city commission goals, Mr. Conkle.
Thank you, Mayor, evening, Budget Committee members and commissioners. So on the tables in front of you, we've handed out the 2019-2021 Goals and Priorities booklet. This is consistent with the goals and priorities that you saw in your budget books, starting on page 1 while you were doing your review. So in February, early February of this year, the commissioners and staffs had a goal-setting and prioritization retreat for the 2019-2021 budget cycle. So being able to sit down over those 2 days with the commission to identify what their goals and priorities are for projects within the community over that 2-year budget cycle. And then from that, we are able to then take that back, and staff works with all the directors, managers to fulfill the best we can those goals and priorities that have been adopted by the commission, while still balancing that with the core services that we provide through police, parks, providing utilities, as well as some of the ending fund balance and contingencies that we want to see in order to be responsible fiscal taking charge of the fiscal responsibility for this community. So what you see before you is really the origination and the basis for the budget that we're going to review tonight. The City Commission did adopt these goals at their City Commission agenda in April, and so those are reflected here tonight. And unless there are any questions, we'll continue to move through the agenda tonight.
Okay. Then is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I would so move.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes of May 1st, 2017 Budget Committee meeting. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Conkle.
Oh, thank you. Well, I just want to start by saying thank you to our citizen committee members on the budget. Going through this process would not be possible without you, so I really do appreciate all the effort that goes into going through this document, commenting to Wyatt, myself, and then being here tonight to take part in that. Also want to thank the commissioners for your continued volunteer efforts on behalf of the city, and once again, the effort that goes into making these difficult policy decisions, and approving the budget is one of those. So I'm very excited to present the budget before you tonight. I believe that we've been able to meet the goals that have been identified by the commission We've been able to do it in a fiscally responsible manner that sets us up for what we know and are projecting to come down the road, and we've been able to do it without raising taxes, as was discussed at the commission retreat earlier this year. As part of the budget overview, I'm going to, as Wyatt was talking about earlier and describing, I'm going to give the budget message, which will then start the ability for that, once I've completed that, to start having deliberations and discussions. And essentially, after my budget message, we're going to walk through every fund one by one, and I will give a very, very brief kind of here's what changed, and then turn it over to the budget committee members if they have any questions. If you don't, that's okay. Some of these are pretty routine. Other ones, I expect some questions. So whether myself or Wyatt can't answer those questions, we do have the executive team and supporting staff here tonight, so that hopefully we can help answer those questions in a timely manner if you do have any. So I'm going to go ahead and just get started on my budget presentation here. So talked a little bit about how the agenda is to go over the budget message first, which I'll be presenting, and then to present a brief summary of each fund for deliberation and discussion. So on the left, you'll have my budget message, of which I do the introduction, the budget overview, the budget highlights, and then we'll get into the budget discussion once I conclude, which is every fund. We'll go through each one of those, offering an opportunity for questions, comments, concerns, whatever else may come out of that discussion there. If you do have questions while I'm going through the budget message, as always, please feel free, but please think of this as a general overview, which is really setting the table for the for the discussions that we're going to have later as we go fund by fund. So I'm really trying to hit some of the highlights of what we've seen and what we tried to accomplish by putting this budget together. The proposed budget is balanced as required by state law, meaning resources equal requirements. The city's executive team prepared the budget with a focus on maintaining core services and achieving the city commission's goals and priorities. We were also able to provide a few small enhancements to core services. So with the budget overview, there are two types of funding available to provide core services and accomplish commission goals and priorities. Discretionary and dedicated. Discretionary revenues can be used for general purposes that are typically accounted for in the city's general fund. Dedicated funds make up the vast majority of the city's budget and include resources that are legally or contractually restricted for specific services. The table provides a breakdown of the allocation of discretionary and dedicated resources for the entire city budget. As shown, approximately 77% of the budget is restricted based on legal or contractual obligations. The remaining discretionary resources are available to fund police, parks, and general government services. The total budget is balanced at $248.3 million over the biennium, with a tax rate of 4.409 per thousand of assessed value, the same rate as the previous two biennia. The tax rate remains well below the maximum allowed rate of 5.06 per thousand. The lower rate saves the average homeowner about $160 annually based on an assessed value of $250,000. I wish, huh?
Keep your home for 1,000 years.
Yeah, it might start to pay back. Oregon budget law requires us to include beginning and ending reserves in the budget. Actual budgeted revenues total $159.8 million, while expenditures total $204.2 million. The reason expenditures exceed revenues, as shown above, is because local governments typically have to accumulate funding over time to fund a large project. For example, the city accumulated transportation resources over several years to save up for the large Myers Road Extension project. Similar rationale for the Public Works Parks Operations Center at First Street, as well as the police facility. So you see that accumulation over time. Once we have enough resources across multiple funds or a single fund, you see that expenditure happen. The slide here shows where the money comes from across all funds, along with comparisons to previous years. Charges for services are the primary sources of revenue for the city and fund the utilities: water, wastewater, pavement maintenance, and storm. Property taxes are the next largest revenue source and primarily fund police and parks services. Other sources include franchise fees and rights-of-way user charges, intergovernmental revenue, And then you'll also see transfers, bond proceeds, and interest that we accumulate. This chart shows where the money goes, our expenditures. Oregon City is primarily a service delivery business, so personnel costs make up a large percentage of the budget, about 27%. There are 210 employee equivalent funded in the full budget. This represents an increase of 1.75 FTE, full-time equivalents, over the existing biennium, which we have been able to accomplish with the existing resources. We were able to increase 3 FTE with a reduction of 1.25 FTE, which is accounted for with the retirement of one of our staff in library and a planning position that was on a temporary basis that has been removed. The budget also allocates 40% of spending for capital facility projects and utility system improvements. This is higher than in previous years because the capital includes large projects such as Police and Municipal Court Facility, the Public Works and Parks Operation Building, Malala Avenue Phase 3, and the Myers Road Extension. Transfers are higher because the city moved accumulated savings to fund the planned projects, Police, Public Works, the ones that I just identified for you. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the project highlights. The City Commission and executive staff participated in the goal-setting process in February of this year and developed the City Commission 2019-2021 goals and priorities. Throughout the budget, funding is included within various departments to support each of these goals. For example, the proposed budget includes ongoing funding for economic development opportunities, including the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. The project is funded from multiple budgets across 3 departments for both planning and capital costs. You'll see funding from the general fund included to support the Willamette Falls Trust fundraising effort and money dedicated for Riverwalk design. In the Transportation System Development Charge Fund, additional funds are allocated for work related to Water Street entrance and pedestrian improvements. So really trying to accomplish and meet these goals and using those multiple resource opportunities where they're appropriate and allowed to make some of those funding requests happen. You'll also see additional funds for Beaver Creek Employment Area, including construction of Myers Road and the associated utility infrastructure. That's budgeted under multiple transportation, water, wastewater, and related SDC, System Development Charge funds, to make that complete project from High School Lane to 213 possible. Another area that the Commission asked us to focus on in an example of some of the budgeting changes that you'll see. When the Commission's goals is to include the development of a citywide facility plan funded under general government. The budget allows the city to move forward with investment in 2 key public facilities to better serve the city's growing population. These include a new police, municipal court, and city commission facility, and the relocation of the city's Public Works Operations Center along with the Parks Operation Division. We'll also see significant investment in transportation projects, which I've talked about. So you really do see that with the funds that we have available to us, really focusing on those core services that we provide in those facilities that we've been talking about for quite a while and to make those come to fruition. We'll quickly go through at a higher level some of the major funds here. The general fund includes programs that are funded by property taxes and general revenues, rather than specific dedicated revenue sources. Police and parks are the primary service areas, as well as economic development and departments that provide citywide support. Property tax revenues are projected at $27.9 million for the biennium. This reflects estimated increases of 4.5% in the assessed value of property for each of the 2 years. Departments across the board were asked to maintain the operating budgets at a 0% increase over the previous biennial budget. Aside from personnel cost increases, such as the cost of living adjustment, medical adjustments, and the public employee retirement system, increases to the general fund budget include 3 additional employees that I discussed earlier and the priorities and goals identified by the Commission. I would like to mention that we have made a concerted effort to address the Commission's request to fund these positions using existing resources. Over this biennium, our expenditures exceed our revenues slightly. We feel that the strength of our beginning reserves provides us the opportunity to fund these positions and the priorities of the Commissions while we continue to carefully monitor the expenditure and revenue assumptions over the next 2 years, positioning ourselves for the 2021-2023 budget. The ending reserves at the conclusion of the biennium, available reserves or contingency are $6.4 million. To ensure fiscal resiliency, the city's goal is to maintain an ending balance of at least 20% of annual operating expenses, which we will be just below. So we're very, very close, and I imagine that at the end of the biennium that we will be there. The percentage consists of a stabilization reserve of expenses for 2 months, recommended by the Government Finance Officers Association, and a 10% contingency recommended under Oregon budget law. These reserves are necessary to provide working capital for the beginning of the next budget cycle and to provide protection against unexpected changes in financial condition should an extraordinary event occur, such as the loss of a major revenue source or taxpayer. General fund reserves are particularly important to municipalities in Oregon because of limitations on ability to increase tax revenues. Strong reserves also help to maintain the city's strong credit rating, significantly lowering the cost of borrowing. An additional $820,000 has been reserved for future expenditures. This includes dedicated resources for the city's tourism program, from the Parks Donations Fund, and for community enhancement grants. The library continues to provide exceptional service to the residents of Oregon City. Recently, the city's library director was the recipient of the Oregon Library Association's Distinguished Service Award for her leadership in the industry. The library fund is budgeted at $8 million for the biennium. District property taxes are projected conservatively at $4.8 million and comprise 59% of the total resources. The remaining significant resources are a beginning fund balance of $2.7 million and transfers in of $300,000 from the general fund. The city's general fund has contributed at least $300,000 each biennium for several years to save for the expansion and will continue payments in the current budget to support debt service on the new facility. The fund accounts for all library operations. The budget for staffing and materials purchase is $3.9 million. Principal and interest payments on the new library bonds are $800,000. After small transfers to the Community Facilities Fund to save for future repairs and maintenance on the new building, the fund is left with $3.2 million in ending fund balance, or its contingency. The Community Development Department manages 2 funds, the Community Development Fund and the Building Fund. Materials and services have decreased this biennium because Community Development recently moved operations to a new city-owned property, and lease payments to the former location are no longer required. The Community Development Fund is budgeted at $3.3 million for the biennium. The primary revenues are charges for services, including $500,000 to customers, primarily for review of land use applications, and $600,000 for long-range planning services provided to other departments. Transfers in from the general fund are $700,000 to support the planning division and services provided to the community. Pass-through revenues and expenditures total $1.2 million. The city collects school excise taxes on behalf of the Oregon City School Districts and remits those funds to the district for construction of school facilities. The planning budget is $2.1 million after subtracting pass-through payments. The personal services budget has been reduced due to the elimination of a limited duration position that was previously funded by grants. The building fund totaled $7.2 million. License and permits revenue of $3.2 million are projected to fund operations for the biennium, with resources over operating expenses added to reserves as mentioned above.
Excuse me. Could you explain how the money comes from the city to the school districts?
The money comes from the city, so when a applicant comes in and submits for a land use permit or a building permit, I'm not sure at which point, there is the school construction excise tax, which is a percent per square foot on both residential and commercial, of which we then collect and then remit back to the school district on a monthly or quarterly basis.
Do we charge the school district for that service?
4%, I believe, that we do charge for our administration fee for those services.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, well, let me ask one more question about that then. So the district is bigger than the city. So does the county do that for them in unincorporated areas?
I've never asked, but I would assume that that's a statewide requirement.
Is that a yes, Wyatt?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So for the building department, the pass-through revenues of a half a million dollar include state surcharge and Metro Construction excise tax monies that are collected and remitted to those agencies. Operating costs are budgeted consistently with the prior biennium. So same thing on the building side for the Metro Construction excise tax, as well as the money that we take in through state building permit programs that we implement and then pass through to the state.
And we charge for those services too, I imagine.
Correct.
Great.
Yep. The Transportation Division is responsible for the construction and maintenance of roadways, pathways, sidewalks, traffic signals, and guardrails. Street operations, which is gas tax funded, and pavement maintenance, which is the utility fee, are accounted for separately within the Transportation Fund. The Transportation Fund is financed by state gasoline taxes, which are anticipated at $5.4 million for the biennium and, in accordance with state law, are required to be spent on transportation system improvements, safety enhancements, and roadway maintenance. Transportation also collects revenues estimated at $5.2 million from the pavement maintenance utility. That revenue is restricted for use in accordance with the city's annual pavement maintenance plan. The total budget of $16.7 million includes $6 million for transportation operations and maintenance, $5.5 million for the Malala Avenue project, which is also funded in part by a $3.8 million grant, and $2.3 million for citywide roadway reconstruction projects. Other important capital projects include a roundabout at the intersection of Lynn Leland and Warner Milne and sidewalks at Gardner Middle School. Additionally, transfers of $300,000 will be made for construction at the new Public Works Parks Operations Center, along with a small amount for fleet replacement reserves.
What's our projected take on the county's vehicle registration fee? How much are we going to get out of that?
I don't think we included it in there because it was going to the.
Approximately $600,000 a year. If it doesn't get referred,
Yeah.
if the referral doesn't win, so we'll see.
Both of those statements are true. So the budget, we did not include those revenues because of the
uncertainty,
and we can come back to the commission with a budget adjustment. And the mayor's absolutely correct. We projected about $600,000 to $700,000.
Thank you.
And that's based on what?
The breakdown of 60-40, 60% goes to the county, 40% goes to the city, and then it's based on population. So they took their numbers and broke them out for each of the cities on population.
True. County projections.
So if our population increases, will our slice increase?
Yes.
Possibly.
And in the reverse.
It is the county after all, so, we got to keep an eye on them.
Yep.
And if I could, while we're on the topic, to keep a clear conscience, you asked if we charge an admin charge, and we do on the Metro excise tax for the building pass-through revenue that Tony was talking about. For the state surcharge, we do not, and the state kind of rules the roost on building fees. So
what can you do? Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. The Water Division maintains and distributes the city's potable water supply and protects public health by closely monitoring the distribution system and complying with all safe drinking water standards. Division activities are accounted for in the Water Fund. It is budgeted at $20.7 million for the biennium. Water utility charges are projected to be $14.8 million, and the city plans to spend down about $3.2 million in reserves that are available for pipe replacement projects. Water rates are budgeted at current levels with inflationary increases of 3% in each year. Operating expenses are consistent with the prior biennium, including $4.2 million for purchases of treated water from South Fork Water Board, the partnership jointly owned by Oregon City and West Linn. Additional funds are budgeted for engineering, patching and paving, leak detection, and emergency repairs. The wastewater division is projected to receive $12.2 million in utility revenue for the biennium. This includes inflation-only rate increases not to exceed 3% in each year. The fund is budgeted to collect $11 million in pass-through charges as well. These funds are collected from customers for the Clackamas County Tri-City Sewer District. The city adopted a sewer master plan in 2014, which established the capital improvement program necessary to meet existing and future system needs, at that time, 7 areas were identified that had significant capacity deficiencies, which could have resulted in overflows of untreated sewage into surface water. As a result, the City Commission as required by state law, adopted a moratorium to correct the sewer deficiencies. 6 of the 7 projects have been completed. to remedy capacity problems. The final project in the Hazelwood Drive area is anticipated for completion this fall. The Stormwater Fund is budgeted to receive utility revenues of approximately $6 million. Public Works is nearing completion of updates to the Stormwater Master Plan as required by the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. The plan is designed to meet new permit requirements for stormwater management and is critical to quality streams, rivers, and groundwater resources. Upon completion of the plan, a rate study and a system development charge analysis will be completed to determine the needs of the system. Expenditures are for staffing and contracts to clean and maintain 22 drainage basins, 53 detention ponds, 4,400 catch basins, 30 miles of streams, and 37 underground detention tanks. The catch basins are cleaned annually, and the detention ponds will undergo scheduled maintenance 18 times each year. In addition, capital projects are budgeted for pipe capacity upgrades at 12th Street, Jackson to John Adams, and pipe replacement projects for Scatter Canyon, Harding Boulevard, and a few additional smaller areas.
Tony?
Yes.
Is our only source of income for stormwater from SDCs? Is there anything else?
There's a stormwater rate charge on your utility bill.
Okay,
It's small.
thank you.
System development charges, or SDCs, are collected on new development to fund future capacity increasing projects required to meet the demands of related growth. SDCs fund projects in transportation, water, wastewater, stormwater, and parks, with each utility accounted for separately. Transportation SDCs project funding includes $7.4 million for the construction of Myers Road from High School Avenue to Highway 213. An additional $1.9 million is included for the Malala Avenue Streetscape project. The Water Division anticipates to utilize revenues and reserves to fund $1.3 million in water line replacements for the Malala Avenue Streetscape project and $1 million for the water line associated with the Myers Road extension. Additional funds are allocated to begin planning and conceptual design for a new reservoir, pump station, and force main needed to serve the Beaver Creek area of our community. The Wastewater Division SDC includes a budget of $1.4 million in expenditures for the Myers Road extension, Hazelwood Drive sewer replacements, and a few smaller projects. The Stormwater Division will fund projects including Myers Road extension oversizing, a stormwater extension on Harding Boulevard, and other minor improvements. With limited funding to support stormwater system requirements, an SDC study is expected to be completed during the biennium. The Community Services Department will soon be updating the Parks and Recreation Master Plan to inform development decisions. However, several important projects are already identified. The SDC budget includes $5.6 million in capital outlay with allocations for Woods Memorial Park in the Caulfield neighborhood and Filbert Run Park in the Hazel Grove Westling Farm neighborhoods, subject to additional grant funding. Funding has also been set aside for an Esplanade Trail system at the Clackamas Cove and for land purchases. Sure.
I just wanted to make mention too, some credit for the Public Works Department, who really did a thorough job of coordinating all their projects for the big transportation projects coming up. Thank you, Alita and Dana. So you can see that while they're working on Myers and Malala, they're coordinating all the utilities that go underground and everything, so that's kind of perfectly put together, cobbling all the funding in each of the funds to do that. That was quite an effort they undertook. Thanks.
Tony? Go back. Mr. Gifford?
So as Wyatt pointed out, we have a small fee on our utility fee for stormwater. We don't have any small fee like that for parks, do we?
Parks are general fund.
Parks are general. So we collect a system development charge for parks, which can be used for capacity.
Right.
And then, yes, that's a general fund expenditure primarily for parks in terms, it's parks, police, general government services are made up of that discretionary side of that table at the beginning.
Yeah.
Rather than the dedicated side.
And your utility bill includes water, wastewater, stormwater, pavement maintenance projects to keep our streets, and the Community Safety Advancement Fund for our police department. No parks.
But not parks.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
So the new reservoir pump station and force main needed, it says for the Beaver Creek area. Is that for the concept plan area or?
Correct.
Okay.
That's funding for site review and kind of getting started with planning. It's not funding for
But
the
it's
whole
to
thing.
support that concept plan.
Yeah.
Correct, yes. So we start to struggle to serve that area because of the topography change out in that area. So, in summary, the City Commission goals and priorities serve as the framework for this budget. I'm proud to present a budget that supports these goals, maintains the tax rate below the maximum allowed, and includes only inflationary adjustments to utility charges. So this concludes my budget message. We will now move on to the budget discussion by fund, unless there are any questions before we begin.
Commissioner Smith?
In the budget message, page V.
I'm sorry, page B or
V.
V.
Roman numeral V. There's a mention under economic development about the Cove project. Is that in the line item later in the budget? And what point is that? I mean, it's under economic development.
Right, so that one goes across multiple funds. There are some system development charge eligible reimbursements for the Esplanade, some transportation, bike ped improvements that are associated with that project. But then you also remember that part of the disposition and development agreement with the Cove was with the Urban Renewal Commission.
Right.
So there's also there's funding in the Urban Renewal Commission budget for that project as well. So another one where we're pulling from multiple sources depending on what is eligible. So the DDA is with the Urban Renewal Commission, and that'll be an expenditure in the Urban Renewal Commission budget next month. But then there are projects that they're doing that are SDC eligible, of which some of those expenditures would be in the system development charge section of parks or transportation.
So I guess I'll just make my comment about this right now. This is basically fulfilling commitments to the past Urban Renewal Commission and the past commission, which I'm fine with. But the wording in here could simply say that instead of supports. The Cove development was not a priority for this commission. It hasn't come up as a priority for the Urban Renewal Commission. And so I think that line later on, that's really picky, but it should just say that the budget basically includes commitments made to the Cove, period.
You're talking, the budget also supports completion.
Yeah, the word support in there twice kind of implies that this budget and this commission supports that project, and we have not made that commitment.
Maybe we could say funds instead of supports. Would that be more acceptable?
I just wanted to raise it as a...
Certainly.
Also, I'm just curious, I apologize, phase 2, where actually is that? Is that on the water side of the Cove?
Surrounding the Cove.
Oh, wow. I won't go in there.
Okay.
So, as I had started earlier, so that's the budget message. Now we're going to walk through fund by fund, and so this should align pretty well with your budget book. So on the slides, we've identified the page numbers that we're discussing to make it a little bit easier to follow as we're going through these. So we're going to start with the general fund is the principal operating fund for the city used to account for non-dedicated core services. We'll be going through each section: policy and administration, general government, police, and community services. Unrestricted ending fund balance is budgeted at $6.4 million, which represents 26% of the operating expenses. The general fund ending balance also includes, as I stated earlier, $820,000 in monies that are restricted for specific purposes. So I'm going to keep these brief, and kind of, if you have questions, we'll try and answer those.
There's a question. Do you want to allow this now?
Can I ask a general question? You mentioned the PERS rate increases and the cost of the budget. And I read in here that you're anticipating that to possibly continue, like we're trying to offset that this biennium and maybe another biennium. Do you think that we'll ride that wave and it really will be over potentially after the next biennium, or are we only really projecting out one biennium and we're not even covering it.
We're projecting out into the next biennium, which is when the next 4.5% tranche would come, similar to these biennium. Much after that, it's hard to say whether the legislature's going to come up with a fix.
How fast Tier 2 dies off?
Tier 1.
Tier 1 dies off, yeah.
So the state and the PERS board had identified some specific tranches that we've already, in the last biennial budget cycle, the one we're in now, we absorbed. In the current proposed budget, we absorbed, and as Tony said, that's 4.5% on covered payroll. An interesting aspect to that is that's to pay a lot of the legacy costs of already retired employees. So it's almost like our entire payroll gets a 4.5% bump. It's not necessarily contributing to the city, it's paying for those legacy costs. And so those projections were for 3 straight bienniums. We've accomplished one, we proposed one, and as you said, we've got the next one that's coming, and that is included in our long-term forecast models. We're cautiously optimistic, probably a little more emphasis on the cautious. We've nailed this second one. The third one, we have to be kind of careful, but we've been on a lot of good things with kind of keep our budgets under wraps. In fact, I guess Tony had mentioned probably this last cycle, but prior to us, some of the commissioners had made some wise choices about setting aside some PERS reserve funds, and that helped us to get through these 2 cycles. We're kind of at the end of that, using those funds.
At what point would this budget committee or forthcoming budget committees need to be making those same kind of calls about the next tier? So you're saying we're kind of good for this biennium and next biennium, but is it next biennium that we start saying, are we saving enough for PERS and we need to make that decision? Or?
Thank you, Commissioner Lyle Smith. So we are adequately making our PERS payments, and the money that we wisely saved up to kind of prepare, set aside for PERS, we've kind of used that up and to this proposed budget. So 2 years from now, when this budget committee meets, we'll tighten up the numbers and see where we're at. That's when maybe the last.
So it could be a line item for the next biennial budget.
Could be that we need to absorb that cost, yeah.
Right. But a lot of that relies on what the legislature does in Salem.
Right.
True.
Or they're the big black box.
So we basically don't know.
Yeah. Or there are 4 ballot measures that are collecting signatures right now that could be on the 2020 ballot that do make some changes for so.
As long as they're found constitutional.
Yeah. Those are excellent questions. We were kind of proud. I mean, Oregon City, I think, has been positioned better than some other agencies. So we were able to maintain core services and still absorb those costs, although Tony gave direction and the department heads all came together and said, let's keep, our costs kind of a flat budget is really what we did.
I guess my only comment is, I understand asking our staff to keep operations, even. So we're kind of relying on you and our managers to say, you know what, we can't do that anymore and this needs to be a line item in our budget. So, I want our managers and our staff to feel comfortable and confident and say, you know what, we're trimming it out as least as we can, but we want our city to operate and them to be able to function well. So I just want to put that out there that, if it looks like it needs to be a line item or something that we need to be discussing, then I'm hoping it is. I know there have been a couple people in the community that have asked me about it, about how the city is handling PERS, and that's kind of it's a hot topic, so it may be a good topic for the Trail News article, but anyway, I'll leave it at that.
I appreciate that, and I think as we work through today, I think that the hard part for us is that without identifying an additional revenue source, there's not a lot of options to enhance core services while absorbing PERS medical, right? So I mean, that's where the discussion is probably going to go in 2 years. It's either a cut in core services because, really your general fund is only made up of X amount of money, or it's a discussion about how do we bring in additional revenue. And I think we've been very thoughtful for the last 2 bienniums, if this is approved, and really trying to be very good stewards of the taxpayer money that's been, invested in the community.
We do have the advantage that most of our neighboring cities don't have, and that is we are not levying our full tax rate. So we have another 60 cents, is that right?
65 cents.
65 cents.
65 cents that we could levy.
we get.
We've chosen not to, and we've, my position has been, let's hold that like a reserve, like a contingency, so that if something really bad happens, like, we get in purse trouble, we have that cushion, and we don't have to go to the voters to do it.
And just to put that into a little bit of perspective, 10 cents on our assessed value is roughly 300,000.
So we could even put more perspective on that just for the commission. And that's really a compliment to the commission, this commission and the past commission. So we could levy 65 cents per thousand additional property tax. We've chosen not to. That all came about in 2007 when we annexed into the fire district. The city promised at that time to not raise the tax rate for 5 years. We're coming up on 12 years. And so that's kudos to you and for the taxpayers. We did do a 25-cent rate increase in 2013 to fund 3 police officers because we were well below our per thousand count on that. And that was very successful in doing that. But that is a feather in your cap and something that we can do. And as the mayor said, it's nice to have that as kind of a back pocket reserve. The impact to the general fund of the PERS was about $400,000. So as Tony said, if we were looking at that for the next tranche, a 10-cent rate increase that would impact taxpayers to the tune of $25 a year could be implemented, to kind of speak to your question.
In your initial presentation, Tony, you talked about some projected growth, and I don't remember if it was property value of 4.5% per year for the next biennium. Is that right?
Correct.
And population is projected to grow as well, right?
0.8%.
Yeah.
So we go back and we historically look at, so obviously we have measures in place that assessed value can only go up 3% a year. But what we've historically seen trending is a little bit above that 4.5% when the time you think of, if you do a remodel, the assessed value comes on, new homes that have come on, new commercial businesses that come on. So that's, while it's capped at 3% for existing homes, we're seeing a little bit above that, even factoring in, the discounts on the early payment if you pay your county taxes ahead of time, as well as delinquencies or do not collects that we see. So we upped it a little bit on the revenue side, on the assumption on the increase in the assessed value, but we're still comfortable that we're well within what we've seen as a historical trend. So does that answer your question? I mean,
yes.
It's an assessed value increase that we're seeing year over year.
And the only way to boost that beyond those projections would be if there was more construction.
More construction, more tenant improvements, yes.
Thank you.
So I have a question as well. Most budgets in local governments are predicated on growth, and I'm very pleased to see that we've been very conservative because growth is not something that's going to continue to be sustainable over the long term. So I'm glad to see that we've got contingencies and we've got reserves for that particular scenario. And Oregon City and the region have gone through a cycle where it goes up and down. So it's not so much a question, but it's just basically an appreciation for not solely relying on that because, from my standpoint, growth is not going to continue to pay for itself over the long term, but we are on a solid foundation in terms of where we are going with our incremental growth in terms of our operations and services. So I'm real pleased to see that.
I think one thing I would pass along, having gone through the 08 big recession that we saw and trying to manage through that, what is interesting, and I'm not sure if folks realize this, is that when a new home is constructed, they take the market value versus the assessed value. So there's a disconnect.
Yes.
And right now it's about 70%. So if you build a brand new $500,000 home, it comes on at 70%, which is $350,000. So there's quite a big spread that we're starting to see again between market and assessed.
Exactly.
And even during the recession in Oregon City and the greater metro region, other parts of the state got hit much differently. But we never had that a significant cross of the market getting below the assessed. So we continued to see that incremental increase year after year, which did help. And so, like I said, right now, we've got a spread of 70%. So there's a pretty big separation between the assessed and the market, which will provide some, cushion should the next recession hit.
When the next recession?
Yeah,
May I make a comment on the stabilization reserve too, to emphasize that point, as Tony said? This is a really important concept for us as a city and with the city commission, and Tony and I have talked about it a lot. And in regard to that stabilization reserve, we have heard from economists at the state that basically with an inverted yield curve, they're looking at probably rolling into something more like a recession coming up. Down the road, we don't know when. The PERS issue is going to come up. And Tony and I have both lived through cycles with cities. 15, 20 years ago, I worked for a city that had their largest microchip manufacturer leave town. The city was devastated. That was the highest property taxpayer. There were immediate layoffs, and it was horrible, and including police officers. So that instilled in us kind of early on that you should have the stabilization reserve, which is simply just something in the savings account that buys you time should something go awry. Some other threats to our revenue sources have been, in years past, the state has said, we might choose to pull back state shared revenues, the liquor tax that we share. That's been spoken about. We've also heard from certain users of our rights of way, like Comcast Cable and such, that are challenging our authority to charge for the community, for the use of our community rights of way. So I think that's really wise of the commission to keep that base layer. And sometimes I worry, should we think about, well, I can just use some of that for now. I'd much rather think, let's have that stabilization reserve, and anything we can do to fund core services above that and have a little extra, let's spend a little extra, but be really thoughtful about not digging into those reserves. We're going to appreciate that rainy day fund someday.
Absolutely.
So I will, next slide.
Yes.
Okay. So in addition to the core services that we provide, we have incorporated the commission goals and priorities, which are reflected in the following investments in staff and projects. As you can see, we focused on prioritizing parks and facilities, deferred capital projects with the majority of the available funding. So based on what we heard from the commission at the retreat, we tried to take what funding that we had available from the discretionary side and identified and prioritized those into what we saw from the commission. So, for example, parks relocation to First Street. It's not equitable for the Public Works utility funds to pay for that complete facility when we know we're putting a parks operations facility there as well. Parks deferred maintenance and capital outlay, $370,000. Building deferred maintenance, $100,000. We've heard a lot of discussion about not letting our buildings get into a dilapidated or run down. So we're really trying to make a concerted effort to set some of those funds aside so that we do have them. Remember, library, we have a new police facility, but we've got 12, 13 other facilities throughout the community. So it's not like this is a lot of money, but it's a start based on the resources we have available to us. The parks maintenance position, so remember this is over the biennium. So at the retreat we had talked about identified 3 positions. Traffic sergeant to enhance the existing 3-person traffic team with an on-the-road sergeant that would help with coordination. A facilities maintenance person. Currently we have 1 facilities maintenance employee for the entire city. And then a parks maintenance worker based on what we had seen, based on typical employees per acreage, for number of parks, for a community of our size. So what you'll notice here on the parks maintenance position, the traffic position, and the building maintenance position is that their impact to the general fund is very, very different. So parks maintenance position is fully funded from general fund. The traffic position, we assume that because it's a working position, they will be on the road and out in the community, that there will be some revenue associated with that, so that the impact on the general fund is smaller. And then a building maintenance position, because they'll be working across multiple facilities, representing multiple departments, we have allocated costs coming in from, if they're working at the current Public Works facility on Center Street, obviously Public Works should be paying part of that. So all positions aren't created equal when you're looking through these in terms of their impact on the general fund. The economic development plan, a strategic citywide development plan, we have not updated ours in probably a decade or so. And then we had talked about the need for an IT strategic plan. We've made a lot of progress in modernizing and backing up our IT system, our backbone, our servers and whatnot, but we really do need to take a step back when you're looking at resiliency, redundancy, security, and take a look at that at a citywide and make sure we're going in the right direction. It's amazing how quickly technology changes, and we want to make sure that we're positioning ourselves well for down the road. So I guess a blunt way to say this is here's where your extra funds went in the general fund. So these are non-allocated, these are discretionary. Like I said, we tried to put these together addressing what we felt were the goals of the commission, as well as the prioritization that we heard on parks deferred maintenance primarily.
Okay.
Any questions?
Right on.
Oh, got one.
I think I've got it figured out. The wording on the park maintenance budget that is in parks right now is specifically for everything that's not buildings and parks. It's for, because I think it's labeled there as vehicle maintenance, tree maintenance, other things. And so basically all park maintenance and all park building maintenance is coming out of the general fund.
Right. And we'll get to that one in a sec.
No, I know. I just wanted to clarify because the wording in the budget message where it says .2 on page VII, where it says $0.2 million in capital spending for parks deferred maintenance, and as mentioned above, the new parks maintenance specialist, that kind of infers that the $0.2 million is including the position and the maintenance, but really, I think it's just referring to the two separate pieces, right? So the park maintenance is, the position is $200,000, and then the building maintenance is $100,000, right? Those are two separate pieces.
That's correct. And specifically, the commission is aware that we've been underfunding parks capital outlay for many years. We tried to, we added $100,000 a year, which is the 200 there for additional capital to put towards parks. That's what we could afford. And fund to hire that new maintenance position.
Okay.
And just to be clear, these numbers are for the biennium or per year?
Biennium.
Biennium, right.
So half it for a year.
Okay, I think I may have questions later, but that's good for now.
We can come back to this one. So policy and administration is shown on pages 33 through 50 of the budget book. Includes the city departments which run the city's administration, provide services to all those city departments, and help guide and set policy. These are the commission, city manager, recorder. Increases in expenses were held to staffing costs in the following. Both the community enhancement program and the tourism program have unspent funds carrying forward, which are proposed to be spent this year. A tourism coordinator added through a budget adjustment last year is funded for the full biennium. Additionally, information and technology is proposing a strategic plan and security audit next year. So I will go ahead and stop and see if there are questions on pages 33 through 50.
Commissioner Smith?
In the biennium, what is coming out of the transient room tax for this next budget cycle? I know that money from 175th celebration is part of that. Is there staffing money coming out of the transient room tax?
There will be. We have not hired that position yet.
But there will be for that, the new tourism specific person?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So right now, the transient room tax, you're exactly correct. We identified funding for the tourism coordinator position. A small portion goes to the economic development manager position. And then we've been trying to hold those funds until we have the tourism stakeholder group up and functioning and deciding how to allocate those resources. But we did feel that some investment in the 175th because of the tourism-based activities associated with that was appropriate. So we've really been holding that pretty tight.
So how much are we setting we're not spending any of the tourism grant money, so that has been built up we're not spending any of the transit room tax on grants.
Correct.
So that's building up too still.
Correct.
Is it, how much is that, is the was it 1.5 million or something like that?
So.
That's it? I guess I'm just wondering, what percentage of the money that's coming in for transient room tax is actually still sitting there from year to year?
Sure.
So the hotel occupancy or transient room tax brings in about $200,000 a year.
Okay.
Commissioner Smith, as you pointed out, the city moved into the direction of a comprehensive tourism program versus giving out small grants a few years ago. And we started out with the intention to build up a little bit of a reserve, same concept as we were talking about the other reserve. If we go down a path of a tourism plan, we want to have a little money set aside in case there's an up or down year, right? So at the end of the biennium, we have about $200,000 was our estimated reserve.
Okay. So basically, what's coming in is being saved as our reserve.
Yeah, so
Pretty
what's
much.
coming in with the $200,000 is there's the budget to fund that tourism position, about $80,000, $70,000 for tourism expenses, and then we added, I think it was $50,000 for the 175th, maybe 40, and then everything else is we're kind of holding in reserve for those future decisions of that tourism group.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
When we get figures for like a tourism position, is that salary only or is that salary plus benefits?
Salary plus benefits.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Gifford?
I'm imagining we're sort of a deferred expense by not having our economic development manager position filled. Yeah? So, I mean, and the trade-off is if we did have that position filled, hopefully that position would be generating more economic development.
True.
So we have been saving some. It's, what is this, April already?
We do account for, I don't want to say every penny, but, you know, there's some things that happen through the course of turnover. You know, one is if someone retires at the top of the range and you hire somebody at the new lower end of the range, we recognize salary and benefit savings from that. Two is if we have positions held open during the budget cycle. To be honest, we typically budget a whole budget cycle. And then the give back at the end where we say, wow, we did better in our budget. You know, at the end of the year, we have a little more than we thought we were going to have. Sometimes that can be because the economic development management position was open for a few months. So you're absolutely right.
Thank you.
Commissioner McGriff.
Commissioner McGriff?
I had a question basically on 34, 35, under policy administration. Besides things like audits under professional and technical services, what else is under that line item? I noticed in some of the other budget funds that legal is specifically called out, but there are some departments where it is not.
So can you give me a specific page number, Commissioner Merrick?
I said 34 and 35.
Okay.
We have descriptions of materials and services, and it's professional and technical services.
Yeah, typically that is going to be, so professional technical services, the definition is a contracted service with a more of a technical level. So an attorney, CPA, an engineer, those types of things. That's usually what's in there for those contracts.
Yeah, under this particular fund, I mean, I understand that engineering would be coming out of Public Works or something like that, but under administration.
Yeah, so I'll choose, so page 34 is kind of an amalgam of the policy.
I'm just saying it's just called out.
I'll go with page 35 because that one I can kind of jump into specifically. So we've got the attorneys in there. So this is the city commission budget. And under the city commission budget, the attorneys attend the city commission meetings. So their charges for services are included under professional and technical services there. And also if they address specific commission ordinances. That's primarily what's happening there. We adjusted that cost down because the actual numbers have been less than the budget for the last few years for the attendance of the meetings. That's why you see a difference from the prior biennium 2017-19 of $168,000 down to $100,000. The prior, when you see the first actual column, 2015 through 2017 actual, 71,000 there, that's probably a good indicator of what it costs to have those attorneys attend and work on those special commission projects and attend those meetings.
But don't they also defend the city in lawsuits such as the issue of the urban renewal thing or the
Absolutely,
water
and
rights?
so that's included in the same professional and technical services line in other departments on other pages of the budget.
So no matter what, this is really a wild ass mess, because at the end of the day, depending on what happens, legally, we could spend a lot more than this.
More or less.
Right.
Yes, or less.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Commissioner McGriff.
Okay.
So for general government, this is on page 51. General government expenditures are budgeted at $4.5 million, include overall community enhancements such as Luana Falls Legacy Project street lighting on city roads, paying PGE, and shared city services, including facilities maintenance and general liability insurance. Transfers out comprise the remaining expenditures with payments into equipment reserve funds for elevator operations and to support the library, planning, and development engineering service areas. The budget includes an increase for a facilities maintenance specialist funded partially by other departments. The city currently only has one position to maintain all the city's facilities. Any questions on our general government proposed budget?
I have a quick question. Sorry, I'm going to return to page 35. Under the special group programs, that line item, neighborhood groups, is that essentially what we're using to support our neighborhood associations, or?
Correct. So that's the distribution and reimbursement primarily for advertising/mailing of the flyers for the neighborhood association meetings.
Is there any inflation or change in that cost, or is that just a carryover from?
That's a carryover, and we've actually, the budget has been a little higher than actual expenses the past several years, so we just maintain that budget. We actually pay the printer directly for those mailings on behalf of the neighborhood associations.
So we tighten that down to reflect what we're actually seeing.
So is there a little bump in there because we know that there's going to be a slight increase in postage, and I'm presuming we use a government rate or?
Both true. Thank you, Commissioner McGriff. So we did notice that there was going to be a bump in postage in this, and that affected some other parts of the budget where we have postage. In this particular case, the budget was a little bit higher than what we're seeing in actual, so it absorbs what the postage increase will be. Yeah, good question.
Any other questions?
So if we, one of the items that we're talking about with the equitable housing thing is this whole mailer, the 300-foot mailing out of the land use, for land use applications. Is that part of the planning budget?
It is.
It's a completely separate item, right?
It is.
Okay.
Before he moves on, I wanted to ask a question about 46, 47, basically dealing with economic development. And I guess I'll just say for the record this is something that's near and dear to my heart, because I was happy to see that there's going to be some effort to be able to talk to businesses. Hopefully they'll know to come to the city if they're looking at possibly moving. And I would use as my classic example that I'm sorry that we had to lose Portland Cider to be in Clackamas, because they were a real asset there on Beaver Creek Road and being in our community. But I think in terms of the, I just wonder, I know we're trying to be fiscally conservative, is this going to be enough?
Unless these are the funds that we have available to us to do the work. If the budget committee would like to reallocate, we can go back to that one slide. Those are the funds that are available.
I understand. And the reason I just asked that is that it's my opinion that we can't put enough money in this, because economic development touches so many things, and it's hopefully. Sorry about that. Keeps happening, Katie.
I need to keep moving it.
We have to, I think, and I know you're very conscious of this, is not making too defining the position so that it's not like it has 50 things to do, but that it has 5 things. This person will have 5 things that they can do well, as opposed to 50 things and trying to touch everything. So in terms of, priority, in terms of what we've got here in terms of goals and projects, I'm satisfied with that, particularly intensifying the business recruitment and participating with Team Oregon, because I think that's a good match for us. So I appreciate that.
I appreciate that, and I think that hopefully over the next year, I think that there's some big questions that are going to be answered by the Commission and the Urban Renewal Agency that I think will probably help refine these even mid-process.
Any other questions on this section? Okay, then we're going to take a 10-minute break. Okay. Okay, we're back to order, and Conoco.
Okay, so thank you. We're going to start with, pick back up at the Police Department, which is on pages 53 through 59 of your budget book. The Police Department, with a total budget of $23.3 million, is the largest department in the general fund, representing 44% of expenditures, and includes both police operations and code enforcement. Personnel consists of 47 sworn and 12 non-sworn positions, including an added traffic sergeant, as a continued investment in the city's traffic safety. Operating materials and services in the department were held to no increase overall, with the exception of the 911 dispatch services provided by Clackamas County, which increased by $70,000 to $840,000 for the biennium. Any questions on the police budget?
What is the time frame of the new police facility?
The
Chief Band,
frame
you want to talk to us
is
about that?
Funny you should ask.
Good evening. So the time frame on the new police facility. So we are scheduled to hopefully break ground in July, August, sometime in there, and it will take, our target date for completion will be August of 2020, so it's going to take about a year to construct the facility.
We're actually doing the ceremonial groundbreaking in late June, the 20th, I think.
I think we're at June. Let's try the fourth date. I think we're June what?
20th, yeah.
20th.
Okay.
I have a question for the chief. Go ahead, Rod.
One of the questions refers to the email or letter from Brian Shaw about where is the marijuana tax listed in the budget? The money coming in from that?
I think it's general services.
I could.
May have been
On page,
It's about, what page?
on page 29
Okay.
is the general fund overview. And on that page in the table in the bottom is the revenue sources that are to the general fund.
Okay.
On page 30, Rocky, it states the city expects to receive approximately $660,000 in revenues this year.
But it goes into the general fund.
Correct.
All right. So I guess my only question is, when are we going to, I know it was an agenda item that's come up multiple times, and that the commission is basically waiting to have a conversation about how to expend money to civic groups and organizations, and that is kind of why we have been holding off on spending that money or allocating it for something. I think, I just don't want to wait too much longer on that. I think we've been asked multiple times by the public to have a conversation about where that marijuana tax money goes, and working at the high school and knowing the impacts that really could have starting as soon as possible. I think it's a conversation we really have to have soon.
I think if I could answer that in 2 parts.
Yeah.
One, we're not holding the marijuana revenue aside.
It's not in our...
It's not like it's sitting there like
Right.
the tourism fund.
Okay,
It's
okay.
being utilized. It's being spent. It's not being held in the fund. And then the commission asked that I come up with a policy as it relates to nonprofits that make funding requests outside of the grant funding proposal. So Willamette Falls Trust, the Willamette Falls Heritage Area, Downtown Oregon City Association.
Right.
Those, and I can't remember if we put money into the locks. So those four were kind of these, not really in any type of a grant. They just came and said, city, can we create an IGA? Can we have a relationship? And so they're trying to create that framework. But part of that discussion is I'm working through creating, how do you decide what criteria on balance? Are they a 501c3? Is there a return on investment? Does it fulfill the goals of the commission? You know, those criteria. But the second part of that conversation is, it's not like there's a set aside pot of funds.
So we're spending that $600,000.
Over the buy-in, the 300, yeah, so about 200 comes into the city, the remainder is state. So we have our 3% local, the tax that we charge, and then we get a state shared revenue that makes up that total number that you have right there.
But right now, what are we allocating that to?
It's going into the general fund.
We funded the homeless liaison officer with that funding, and we shored up the budget. So if Tony were to look at that slide and show, here's the ad packages that we have, it's all kind of within that.
So later, so when we have this conversation about this later, we would be making a budget amendment to what a line item would be and how much money of the general fund would be spent on education programming or whatever?
And that could, yes, Commissioner Smith, and that could be done. We did a little bit of homework, and between the contribution to Downtown Oregon City Association, Willamette Falls Heritage Area Coalition, the others that Tony mentioned, there's about $150,000 annually that's being given.
Okay.
And Tony's intent is to make sure that if there's money given, that's obviously money that's taken away from core services of the city and given to somebody else to do with. I know he's iterated many times. There should be some accountability. There's got to be accountability. There's got to be agreement. The commission has to support these outlays of funds. So that's kind of the point he was making, yeah.
I just don't want us to be locked in when we pass this budget to that $600,000 being accounted for without having that conversation. Because if we get stuck into 2 years without any funding going from that tax to something that benefits the youth in this community, then I think that's a real problem.
I couldn't agree more. And if you're passionate about it, I am, Commissioner Smith. I mean, the funding of the homeless liaison position obviously helps the community, and the police department having that funding helps the community. And I think if the budget committee wanted to, and Tony, we could go through the budget here, but we could go look at those ad packages, and there could be choices made with those fundings. You could say, instead of funding a deferred maintenance of parks, I'd like to put $20,000 into a donation, or we can wait for the city manager to bring in that criteria assessment that you've asked for.
I mean, if we can do, if it's a subject we can address later as a commission, that's fine. I don't think we need to address it tonight, but I don't want to be told later that we can't go back to that because we already passed the budget.
We can address
so
it later. That's correct, Commissioner Smith.
Okay.
Thank you.
The next
Rocky,
question.
before you move on to that, it would be helpful to have some information about that, because I got a text this morning and I sent a text back saying, I don't know who you are and how did you get my number? The text we got this morning
From
about
Brian?
Yeah, it said Brian Shaw, but it could have been anybody. Somebody could have written Brian Shaw's name.
The other question I had is regarding parking. The parking, how much money comes in with parking? Do we make a profit on parking, or?
We don't make a profit. I'm gonna ask us to move on, and I've got the crack team over here that can pull out the worksheets and probably
we'll come back
dig into that. We'll come back for that
The
information.
exact number.
Okay.
Cranking it right now.
Is it a quick question? For Chief Band. So some of the neighborhoods talked about like some of the homeless issue. This is on the bottom of 55, talking about the homeless liaison officer. But, you know, I think this is probably one of the most important items we have in our budget, but at the same time, it seems like it just doesn't seem like maybe it's enough. Like the issue seems to, in a lot of ways, is worse than it was a few years ago. I've had a few run-ins like
14th and Washington, like all over, you know. My kids have kind of had some things, and can we just real quick talk about some of the metrics and how you measure success in this program?
It could be a very long answer.
I know.
The best
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No,
but-
it is an excellent question that is very important to people in this community. And what I can kind of tell you is there's been an evolution in this city, and there's been an evolution to kind of how I and our department approaches this. And this is why this position is so important. When Father's Heart first came here, there was a big change, and they're doing great things for homeless people. But there was also this ripple effect that happened to the community, right? So we thought, well, you know, Hammer's always looking for a nail in the policing world. We'll just arrest our way out of this problem. We learned very quickly that just absolutely does not work. We need to start working with the community and understanding the community. The interesting thing is, it seems like we're not doing enough. There are no other police departments, even bigger departments than ours across this state. Very few have a dedicated full-time staff person to do it. The sheriff's office doesn't, and they're a lot bigger than we are. So we're doing a lot. But a lot of what we're doing is, you hear in 21st century policing about legitimacy. What does legitimacy mean in policing? It really means fairness. A lot of people in the community don't feel like they're treated fairly by the police. I want to know that you are legitimate in what you're doing in the community, police officer. And that's part of what this position really does, is it shows that Officer Day does a lot more finding people money to get housing, meeting people, knowing who they are. I was just with him walking down in the peninsula talking to a 20-year-old girl who's been homeless for 4 years. He makes these relationships. And what that does for us is it allows us to kind of get in the boat and row a little bit with the effort to help homeless people. So when we're critical, or we say, hey, this is not right, or we can't do this, that we're not just seen as the officers who are wanting to arrest people or yell at people who are just negative and you don't like the homeless people. They realize we are also trying to help, but it allows us to, with legitimacy, speak on behalf of the neighbors who are saying, hey, I'm afraid to walk out on the street. I'm afraid of the guy who was just in my garage, and those sorts of things. There's a lot I can tell you that he's doing. One of the things, too, is police have become, it's a lot of social work that we're doing, right? And there's a lot of mental illness in the homeless world. And a lot of what he is doing proactively is getting services to people who have mental health issues. The reason that's so good is because we don't want to have use of force incidents. And people that might otherwise be a problem, we've got somebody embedded in that community that can find a solution for, say, a schizophrenic or something like that. Who, a lot of homeless people don't cause anybody problems. It's a portion of them that cause all the problems. Right. Does that kind of answer some of your question?
Yeah, I mean,
It
I was
doesn't
just
fix the
wondering, like,
problem,
kind of
but-
just general, like, how many, and maybe this is something you just don't have access to, like, has there been a net increase or decrease in Oregon City? Like, what's the percentage versus the rest of the state? I mean, just some of those kinds of things. So people have a perception of it being really bad, and maybe it is, maybe it's not. I don't know.
There is no way to quantify.
Okay.
And quite frankly, I don't think that it is such a big problem. And I truly believe that communities that do a lot of good things for homeless folks, the downside is they tend to get more opportunity. I think if there's 300 people living in Oregon City who are homeless, and we built 300 houses for people, we would have 600 homeless people the next week.
Yeah.
Because those, like anybody else, you're going to go for services. It makes sense.
Yep.
If I'm a homeless person, I want to live somewhere in the vicinity of somewhere I can get a shower, get some help, get a meal. So it's kind of the crux of the problem of what we're dealing with in Oregon City.
Okay.
I had a question. One time you came and visited when I was chairing the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, and you brought to us an amount. And I don't know what the low amount was, but it was something like you said, 1 year it was 8 incidences and then next year was 80. And that's how you quantified that when that change happened, where people were coming from Portland Metro to Oregon City to get services. That's how you quantified it.
Yeah.
So that my question now, kind of going with what he's saying, is that now less or more since?
No, so I'm justifying the position or telling you that that position is doing a ton of work, but it is absolutely not, homelessness is not going to get fixed by a police department anywhere.
Right, no.
Those numbers are increasing. Some of the numbers you're talking about, this is rough off the top of my head. I think the year before Father's Heart, we cleaned up 18 homeless camps over the year. This year, I think we're going to be over 100. Last year.
And my apologies. I think what I'm saying is more about like arrests and things that were related to that situation.
Like police interactions.
Right, police interaction in a negative way, because I do see that how Mike Day having the one-on-one with people, they're less likely gonna, to me, I'd feel like they would less likely act out because they know that they more feel associated with Mike Day so that's my question is, has that 80, I think you had said that 80 was like arrest or situations in a negative manner?
Well,
hope that makes sense.
The 80 number, what I can tell you is the interaction with the homeless has escalated since 2013, and it will continue to. The positive interactions have exponentially increased. I'll give you a number. Last year, Mike Day applied for and received $75,000 in grants to help people who are on the verge of becoming homeless. It's exhaustive, the background that he has to do, but there's several families where he's been able to see, there was a financial thing that's going on here, and if we can help them with $4,000 or $5,000 to secure their rent or help them out to keep them from becoming homeless, those have been the huge success things. That $75,000, if we did not have Mike Day, we would have never touched that grant. We just didn't have time for it. We never knew that it was there. Some people give me a hard time about the Arta Potty program. When we were interacting with the homeless, we had a bunch of people in a room, and the thing that people who'd been homeless before said is, people need bathrooms. Everybody's complaining about them using, the front door downtown or those sorts of things for the bathroom. Mike got creative and found this program where there's still porta potties, but at least they got some art on them, and it's pretty successful. Those get used a lot, and if they weren't going there, they'd be going somewhere else. So this is a tough one, and this is something that communities all over the place are trying to solve. The other thing I'd say is there's $50 million that the city of Portland is spending between Multnomah County and Portland. Their program, $50 million. And a lot of communities spending lots and lots and lots of money. And you would think $50 million would take care of a homeless problem in any city.
Maybe the bottom line is the residents. So
we're getting our money's worth with that officer, I can tell you that.
And it's full-time position.
Full-time, that's all he does.
Yeah.
So I'll have a budgetary question for the chief, but I do want to comment on this. Since the advent of the Father's Heart, some of this is information we were previously furnished. We've had a 40% increase in nuisance calls. That was in a previous presentation. Our police department, despite being held in high esteem, people don't feel safe on the streets, as evidenced tonight by Heidi McKay's statement. That fear that they feel is what it is. Obviously, I'd like to see a more regional, statewide, or national solution versus ourselves alone, and for the very reasons you stated. And the truth is, and this position that you spoke about and its benefits, realize this: you cannot measure an event that never happened. So how many events did not happen by virtue of this position?
Right.
So I would state that.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on what Commissioner O'Donnell said in terms of, I don't have any issues with the proposal as is, and obviously strongly support the traffic sergeant coming on because we know we need it. I know that you and I have discussed this many times. The number one concern that I hear at neighborhood meetings is traffic, and more traffic, and the speed. So we've got Mike Day here in Oregon City
what generally is going on at Clackamas County, our sister cities? Is there any coordination or any, does he get together with other people in the other jurisdictions to say, hey, what's going on with, because obviously homelessness doesn't have a boundary. It crosses boundaries, and I've had people in West Lynn say, oh, we don't have a homeless problem. I said, oh, yeah, you do, you just don't see it.
So he does coordinate with other people. The most interesting thing is that the majority of the coordination he does with other cities is them contacting us because they've heard about what we're doing. It isn't really, there's not a ton of help out there. And so it's, the city should be proud of this, but we've got people from Chicago have called us saying, hey, we heard about what you, I don't know how somebody in Chicago finds out that Oregon City has an officer dedicated to homelessness.
They're on Facebook.
But they do.
Yeah.
I'm not on Facebook. But
It's all those tweets.
I think to the regional effort, I think that, and this is just my opinion, that I think that because the problem needs to get solved by many people. And I think that if everything is concentrated in one area, then that area is going to bear a burden. We heard a statistic the other day that 41% of the shelter beds were in Oregon City. Oregon City is 10% of the population of the county. And I want homeless people to be helped. I want them to have shelters. We had a homeless woman die trying to stay warm in a tent in this city. But trying to get this to be a more regional thing where every city is stepping up and doing something is what I think would be the best approach. And who gets the other cities to buy in and do that?
Maybe all the city managers get together and start talking about it. We have Clackamas cities, and that seems to me that's a discussion that needs to happen at that level, because it's not solely Oregon City's problem.
Okay, so.
But thank you, Dan.
I'm gonna cut this line of conversation off. If we have questions about the budget or comments about the budget itself, let's stay there. The bigger issues are for discussion at the city commission level.
I think we have the follow-up on Commissioner Smith's question about parking.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Holliday and Commissioner Smith. So, wait, it's evolving.
It's a tweet.
Thank you very much, Maria. So,
It's a 20th century tweet.
Commissioner Smith, you asked about the parking revenues and whether that covers expenses. It doesn't, but we're getting closer. So, the parking meter charges, the parking lot charges from what we own, the permits, and even the fines, if folks are paying those, add up to about $540,000. And we're looking at about $620,000 for all of the staffing and, that go and collect all those fees and all those things. So
Mr. Gifford?
I'd like to build on that. And a couple of months ago, there was a really, more than a couple of months ago, but recently, there was an article in the Economist magazine that contended that one of the least effectively valued assets in a city is its parking spaces. Parking spaces belong to the entire community, and they are undervalued. And people say, oh, there's no parking. But you know what? If the parking was more expensive, there would be more parking. And I don't know what consideration has ever been given to increasing the charges for parking. People would say, oh, I don't want to pay that much to park downtown. But you know what? It's cheaper to park downtown here than it is in Portland.
We've done as part of the Willamette Falls Legacy project, we did look at parking downtown, and we built on the downtown parking management plan. And so in there were certain, thresholds that you start to hit, which start to help inform and make decisions about 2-hour versus 4-hour versus 8-hour, where that goes. It gets into the rate setting. It gets into, how do you utilize your on-street parking versus your off-street parking. So I don't recall the complete study and what it talked about rates, but rates are certainly a component of effectively managing a downtown.
Commissioner Smith, did your question get answered?
Mostly. So I get, it used to be that parking was a separate line item in there, and I know we've consolidated. It used to be jokingly referred to as the trolley fund. So is the money that comes in from parking stays within code enforcement, within parking alone, or does money from income from parking go to other things broader than parking?
Code enforcement, including parking and abatement, the costs of that division by far exceed parking revenue. All the parking revenue is relative, it's dedicated because there's not an excess.
Okay.
Is that, yeah.
But within parking?
Yeah, parking money is not spent in other areas of the city. It supports the code enforcement.
Okay, thank you.
Parking collection, thank you.
Any other budget questions for this section?
I have one, Mayor.
Commissioner?
On page 55, understanding that code enforcement falls within the purview of the police department. Under materials and services, there's a line item charge of $186,500 for repair and maintenance services. Further explained, second paragraph from the bottom, that figure includes waste disposal of $156,500. Can someone give me a basic explanation of the origin of that?
Yeah, so we're at page 59. 59. Excuse me, I can't read. Thank you, Chair Holliday and Commissioner O'Donnell. That's a great question. So why would code enforcement deal with waste disposal? So we have a franchise agreement with B&B Leasing, who provides the garbage services throughout the city. And included in that agreement is that the city, for its facilities, receives free waste disposal. And there is also a percentage that's allocated to these programs, which are geared toward nuisance abatement or beautification within the city. So those monies, so basically we get the benefit, and all cities have that choice of a franchise with who wants to come in and provide those services. And we are able to regulate their fee increases, but we also are able to get free garbage service to a lot of our facilities and have some of those monies that can be left over for those nuisance abatement and other programs.
I guess my more specific question is, what is the origin of that waste that requires $156,500?
It's the city's trash.
That's it?
Literally that.
And that encompasses for trash generated by our facilities?
Everything, so construction projects, debris, I mean, the city's big with all of the utilities, all of the city hall, we've got 13 facilities, all of the trash.
Parks. Where are these camp cleanups covered? The camp cleanups that you referred to are a new high, is that part of this figure?
Yes.
It's not. The waste costs are just the amount that we pay for waste hauls. If you have, like, the cleanup, if there's some waste hauling as part of it, that'll be put in there. But there's a separate line item for all those, under nuisance abatement, for all of those.
So Deputy Finance Director McElveen clarified that the 156 is for waste hauling for all of the city's waste. And not that we have a lot of waste.
And that's per biennium.
I guess
and that's a biennium also. So
I can have a separate conversation about what's the cost of camp cleanups. We can answer that separately, not tonight.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell.
Yeah.
Commissioner Glass-Smith.
So I have two short questions, I think. One for Chief Band. Was Officer Day asked specifically in preparation of this budget if there was any specific line items that he thought would be really beneficial to his work as the homeless lead? I mean, working on this homeless issue is a priority for the commission, so was he given that opportunity to, like the Arta Potties, if he said we needed 5 more Arta Potties? So I'm just wondering if he was given that opportunity. And then my second question is for Tony regarding are we relying solely on this position for homeless work in the community, or are there any other staff members who, as part of their day-to-day operations, may contribute to this conversation that maybe we should recognize as being part of the solution, or is it really all centered on this one position that we put all of our eggs in this one basket at this point in time?
I think I'll jump in first, if that's all right, Chief. I think that our interactions with the homeless community is probably across every staff member that's out in the field and in every one of our facilities. because I would say that every facility has had at least an interaction, if not a weekly to daily interaction with homelessness. So whether that's through additional coordination with Clackamas County Health and Human Services, Officer Day, just having those materials available to point somebody to, whether that's a mental health crisis versus just, I'm just down on my luck. So.
But we don't have a person in a particular department or anything like that that is working with Officer Day, you know, with housing and homeless services or anything like that at the county level.
Not that structured. I think the issue, what we deal with is trying to cross-train multiple employees because you never know who's going to be at the desk in the field. It's not like it's one person at the library is always going to deal with homeless folks.
Right.
So everybody has to be trained to be able to diffuse, identify, and address that situation. I think Maureen Cole and her staff have done a really good job. I know some of the parks folks have done a really good job in coordinating with Officer Day. Received training, improved communication, increased visits. But as for a person in the city other than Officer Day who just deals with homelessness issues, no.
So there's one thing I could just kind of tack onto that one of the things that he does really well, there are a lot of services out there, and a lot of homeless folks just don't know that those services exist. Some of them are in the private sector that help them get things like, some people just need if they can get a driver's license, and to get a driver's license, they need a birth certificate, so they need help with stuff like that. But the county does have services, and Mike's got them all on speed dial. Behavioral health, that's one that he utilizes a lot. The rest of our officers use them a lot. There was a training that we just did with behavioral health to a bunch of our staff, and we're getting ready to do more. And then there are, it used to be called Centerstone, and they changed the name, but the county does have a mental health service up on 82nd, and Mike works with them. There's a center the jail has right out, that Clackamas County has. So he coordinates with a bunch of different people at the county level to get them resources if they want them.
But he's not going to say, after this budget is over 6 months from now, if only I had X, if the city had given me X, then I could do, 50 times greater. I'm making up numbers,
Right.
but that's just, I just want to make sure that question is answered, we're sinking a lot of attention into this position to serve as this role and this priority for the commission. So I just want to make sure he's not going to come back 3 months from now and say, man, the commission never considered my
No, so
5 porta potties I need.
The thing that he did ask for was he came to us, the original agreement on the Art of Potties was the Clink Scales was offering to do that for half price. Well, that ended. And so Mike came to us and said, hey, this is doubling. Our fees for this are going to double, and there's a need for more of them. So there is a budget item in here of 75. It's not in yours. It's smaller, but he never had a budget item before. Now there's $7,500 a year to go toward that program, and he also got. Salem didn't want theirs anymore, so we got some more that we got those for free. But it does cost more money to service those, and that's reflected in. It's just not. It's in more fine print than your version.
That's fine. I just wanted to
Commissioner Lyle Smith, I know we're kind of moving on, but also we had the homeless population has an impact on the parks specifically as well. And I know that in talking with the park staff, with Tony, the addition of that position, the parks maintenance position, a lot of times they'll come in and have some cleanup related to a camp or something like that. So there's a lot of synergy working between library, police, parks, and that parks position definitely will help with some of those cleanup issues.
Okay.
Chair, you probably want to move along.
No other questions? Okay, thank you.
Community services includes parks and cemetery maintenance, aquatics, the Pioneer Center, and recreation. Additionally, dedicated park donations are tracked separately to comply with donor restrictions. As we discussed during the retreat, park staffing is well below industry standards. Therefore, we have incorporated an additional parks maintenance specialist into the budget from our existing resources. Increased funding for deferred capital maintenance includes funding to address needed deferred maintenance improvements, such as $490,000 for DC Letteret Park. $75,000 for the McLaughlin Promenade parking lot at the VFW Hall, $50,000 in asphalt repairs throughout the city, $60,000 for Park Place playground equipment replacement. Equipment and software needs total $67,000 for the biennium, which includes cemetery plot tracking and mapping software. So we're discussing pages 61 through 72 of the budget before you. Highlighted on the screen, just once again, some of those capital deferred maintenance programs, projects that we're proposing to implement. So some of the questions raised have been around why DC Ladderette. And I think when we get to the system development charges, we'll also see that there is investment in the Woods Memorial Park that's through system development charges, a portion of Filbert Run. Potential park acquisition funds have been set aside as well that are SDC eligible. So it wasn't at the expense of other projects that have been waiting in the queue. This was a concerted effort by staff to try to put together and prioritize parks projects. The DC Ladderette one stood out a little bit in that it had additional funding brought together from philanthropic nonprofit donation that we were hoping to leverage. If you visited DC Ladderette, it's a hard park to do halfway. Where the playground's proposed is up on top of the hill, which means if we build the playground, we need to build ADA. So it needs to be ADA accessible. If you do the park, if you do the basketball court at the bottom and you don't do the playground, when you come in to do the playground, you're going to destroy the basketball court. It was just a tough park to phase. So we really scrimped and pressured, and this is one of the ad packages that we identified where we're bringing additional funds above the normal baseline capital to try to, one, meet what we heard in terms of addressing deferred maintenance, but also leverage that against funds that we know are coming in through a pretty robust public grassroots project that could have an immediate impact. So I will stop there and take questions.
So I'll start. The question I have is the process whereby this $490,000 appeared. Because the information I have is, other than one meeting, one Parks and Rec Committee meeting in, I think, April, that there had been no discussion with the Parks and Rec Committee prior to that about funding this particular park. And I see some real dysfunction there between the manager and the Parks and Rec Committee. Normally, something like this would go through 2 or 3 Parks and Rec Committee meetings. They would talk about, in detail.
I hope that sorry.
Well, the information I have is that that didn't really happen, that there wasn't any robust discussion about where this was a priority for the Parks and Recreation Committee. And, I'm just surprised that everybody's always screaming about we have to have public participation, and here's a project where we had 0 public participation as far as the process is concerned.
I would join in that commentary. You have to have a respect for a process. In a world that's competing for dollars, different areas of the city competing for dollars. I'm not saying that isn't the correct choice. I'm saying it needs to go through the process and be discussed and allocations made with public input and the benefit of PRAC.
I mean, how long has Filbert Run or the Tyrannus Woods Park been in the process? How many discussions about those have happened at PRAC?
5 years.
And I would say a ton, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just a little shocked that, I'm not saying I wouldn't support this. I'm saying I think we have a problem with the system as it sits right now. Commissioner Smith.
I agree, but this is a tough one. I know that there's been a community process on this park for 3 years, more, maybe, 3 or 4 years, and I've been part of it as a citizen a little bit. So there has been a process there. There hasn't been a process here, and there hasn't been a process that clearly has been communicated to PrAC.
So has this group appeared before PrAC?
I assume they have, and I know and I know there's been multiple community outreach things for this project. So this project has been, I think, on the community's radar, but it hasn't been on our priority list, and it hasn't been brought to us by Parks as a priority list. So that's, I think, the tough piece of it, because we're seeing pieces of that process, but it's not the full process. And I guess the red flags that I have, I feel comfortable with the city manager's explanation tonight, because this was a big red flag for me, based on the fact that we've had, our 2 recent meetings have had letters from PrAC members saying, we know nothing about this. So to me, the communication that's not happening there needs to be fixed. I know that if we listed 3 parks that are on the top priority list or have been in process, it's been these 3. So knowing that this being bumped up hasn't negated those other things off the list makes me feel comfortable about it. But there's some other issues here that need to be addressed, probably not at a budget meeting, but I feel this was probably this topic was probably half of my notes. But I feel better about it now.
And I think this is, I think, you know, a little bit of the sausage making here is that I guarantee you every one of my directors came to me with asks. And I said no. We said no. We decided what are those priorities, and this one honestly was one of the more difficult ones, because we had already in the previous biennium raised that baseline capital for parks. We had taken rights-of-way fees, and put that in there to try to bolster that deferred maintenance budget line item, and now this was an ask above that again. In that balancing act, it was really hard, and so this wasn't done just willy-nilly. I mean, this rose and rose and rose to the top, and I went back and watched the April PrAC meeting, and I think that if we made an error, it wasn't in attaching the price tag, the investment associated, but there was over 3 minutes spent talking about DC Ladderette Park, and there was not one question.
I think that can frequently happen. I think our interest tonight is in moving the budget process along.
Yep.
I certainly have no objection to leaving that number in the community services budget. I'd like to clarify how that decision was made. I want the community and PrAC and everybody else to be satisfied that that's the correct decision. But perhaps we could leave it in the budget as an item but not earmarked, and then we could discuss it further in detail, unless somebody has a better solution.
How did we get to this number?
How did we get to the DC Ladderette number?
How did we get to the $490,000?
We have cost estimate, construction cost estimates on what's needed to invest and bring the property up to what was envisioned through the public participation process. So that is a number with construction, materials, and contingency.
We have a tentative plan.
We do. That's been costed out.
And that's what you cost estimated on.
Correct.
Okay.
So it's a pretty solid number. And how it got in here was me making the decision that we had an opportunity. And honestly, I thought this would be received a lot better than it has been. I thought that we really made sacrifices to try to bring funds to the table. I mean, yes.
Deed goes unpunished.
I know. I mean, it could be the same thing with which parking lots we're doing or which paths we're doing. I mean, staff at some point brings you a proposal. If it's not where you want to spend the money, that's fine. We can reallocate. But
Commissioner McGriff, you have some?
I just want to say I support this being in the budget, and I will concur with what City Manager said, that I have been at more than my share of PrAC meetings where it has always been discussed that monies that the group brought in were going to be leveraged, hopefully leveraged by the city. And that's what it was based on. There was discussion after discussion after discussion over months. And Karen could probably tell me how many times, but I've been to more than 24 meetings. It was been on the agenda every time. We've got this grant, it's going to get leveraged this way, and the city was going to put some money into it. Again, maybe 490 wasn't specifically called out, but I appreciate the information that we received from former PrAC member, but I think there was, as they say, with some chicken, there are some parts missing in some of the communication, but I think this is an opportunity for us as a community to leverage, and not any of the other things on the list are leveraged in this way. And I think this is an opportunity that's going to show not only the funders on the private side that we've stepped up. So I think we should leave it in, and I support this.
Yeah.
So does anybody have an objection to leaving this item in the budget?
Not after what she said.
Well,
Okay, Commissioner Smith?
the question is earmarked for that specific purpose, or, because Commissioner O'Donnell basically said leave it in the budget, not labeled as a specific use, and I think that is not what.
That's not what I'm saying.
Hold on a second. We're not going to have sidebar conversations.
Done.
That is not what I'm saying.
So I would agree with Commissioner McGriff that we keep it in the budget. I feel like the city manager's explanation warrants that. I think he's heard our concern about the communication issue, and that needs to be fixed. But I'm assuming, based on Commissioner McGriff's comments and what I know of this project, a lot of this money is, a lot of grants are out there that we will lose if that project doesn't move forward, or if that money is not earmarked for this particular purpose. We have the ability to lose grants that are already been given, not even, well, from multiple places, I think. Is that true?
In this case, $120,000, correct.
Okay.
So, Commissioner O'Donnell, is this a hill you're willing to die on? Okay, let's move on.
Any other questions on the community services?
There are other park projects, right? Like the Tyrone S. Woods
Yes.
Parks and all that. I mean,
Yes, Tyrone is, what I've laid out here, the VFW parking lot, Park Place playground improvement, replacement, asphalt repairs of some additional past parking areas throughout the community, the Tyrone S. Woods, Filbert Run, although we've got another grant going in for that one to help try to supplement the system development charges that are going in there. We've been asked to look at Clackamas Park as well. So this wasn't just, we put all the money into one project and nothing else is going to happen. We really tried to, diversify where we were able to do some investment and then supplement that by making some strategic decisions about what not to do in other areas.
so this doesn't show all of the diversification that's kind of in other areas of the budget.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioner Lyle Smith. And I know we're going to move on, but a really good picture is on page 142 of the budget. On page 142, in that area, the CIP section, you have a list of all the capital projects throughout the different departments. And the Parks and Cemetery is right kind of in the middle of the page, Parks and Cemetery facilities. So you get an idea of the scope of on page 142, the Woods Memorial Park Development, $2 million. Filbert Run Park Development, $1.6 million. Land purchase options, DC Ladderette Park, $490, and some other things. So that gives you kind of a picture of what's included in the budget total, including the parks operations and the system development charges allocations that Tony talked about earlier.
Yep, so right in the middle, third one down.
So the last question I have on this is the other parks that are mentioned, those are basically just leveraging SDC funds. They're not leveraging any private nonprofit funding. You're trying to get grants from the state.
State funds, state leveraged.
But they're not leveraging any.
Woods Memorial, we have the potential, but that'll probably be for the Woods Memorial itself.
But not infrastructure or anything like that.
Right, correct.
Yeah, okay.
It's state grant funding.
I just thought that needed to be clarified, that we're matching some money over here, we're getting some matching money over here, but it's not private funds to do major improvements.
It's too slow.
Boy, it just hates that, doesn't it?
Half a second too late.
Would you allow this app to make changes to your device? No.
Chair.
Got to do those upgrades.
What? Oh, Commissioner.
A question about the parking lot. That is the VFW parking lot?
It is.
Okay, so even the fact that we call it the VFW parking lot is really interesting since it's actually.
No, well, we call it the McLaughlin Promenade
I know,
Park, but
everyone else,
Yeah.
I guess, my only point would be is we clearly have deferred maintenance issue with parks. This is a parking lot that, one, we don't promote as a public parking lot.
I didn't know.
That no one really knows that they can park there. And so we're spending parks money for a parking lot that's really essentially, yes, a parking lot, but it's also a parking lot that allows people, if they knew they could, park there and take the elevator down, which means that ties in more broader to me than a parks budget thing. So the fact that we're pulling all the money out, and for future, if we're having a parking lot that acts as a public parking lot, I don't think Parks Department should be covering the complete cost for something like that.
Okay.
Because it definitely, that particular parking lot, well, and also, if we don't even have a sign there saying it's a public parking lot, how many of us do that?
I didn't.
People will assume
You know,
that's
I
a
mean,
VFW
we know it
facility.
on paper, but there's nothing there telling the public that's our parking lot to park there, and we're spending $50,000. So I hope that $50,000 includes a sign.
well, maybe we can, I think that one of the things that we had talked about, so thank you for that. We'll make a note in terms of, we had looked at maybe using City Hall as free after-hours parking to use the elevator to get downtown to alleviate some of that. Maybe this could be another parking lot that we look at.
So it's, somewhere in here it's listed 50,000 and somewhere else it's listed, where was it listed? Anyway,
Page 142 says 75,000.
yeah, but it's listed somewhere else. I have it highlighted.
Correct. Page 142 is an amalgam of STCs and the operations.
Find
And
it.
on page 65 is the operations only.
Aha, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, is this horse dead?
Yep.
Then we can move on.
Over the last year and a half, the library went through a strategic planning process with a new plan, where a new plan was adopted by the City Commission in February of 2019, reflecting the goals of the library and the community now that the new addition and renovation are complete. The proposed budget funds the improvement and expanding of library collections, including new Library of Things, and seeks to improve children and youth literacy and learning opportunities and activities at the library and through partnerships targeting at-risk youth. Staffing hours have been reallocated from an employee retirement to allow for additional full-time library staff without any increase in net FTE or increased costs. Additionally, some part-time hours have been reduced as a result of the pre-processing of materials through the RFID chip process that was put in place and now occurs off-site. Any questions about the library?
I did.
That's more of a statement.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, so the question is, the community rooms, is that a rental thing or is it free to rent? The community rooms in the library?
Mo, is it a rental or a free, or does it depend?
It's free. Oh, okay. I just wondered if there was any, more money coming in of facility rentals, but there's not. Okay.
Okay, moving on.
Ding.
Community development is responsible for working with the community to guide growth and development within the city limits. The department performs long-range planning projects and community outreach, interprets and applies municipal code standards and appropriate comprehensive plan policies to propose development projects. They interpret and apply construction codes and standards to approve projects and implements the city's development policies and programs. The proposed budget includes savings due to the relocation of community development into the newly reconstructed city-owned facility, and the completion of the permitting system upgrades. The budget represents further reductions for savings due to elimination of a limited duration position. In total, the budget decreased by about $784,000. This can be seen on pages 81 through 83 of your budget book. Any questions concerning planning?
Commissioner McGriff?
Obviously, this is another department that's near and dear to my heart, and I would say I don't think it's enough money because they have a mountain load of work, but I did want to ask where in the line items are the grants that they have been receiving for projects? Is it specifically called out, or did I just miss it?
On page, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner McGriff. On page 81, in that table under the resources.
Yep.
There's a line item called intergovernmental.
Okay.
Those are grants received from the government, and you can see that, or from the agencies like Metro. We had some of those significant grants in the 2017 through 2019 amended budget. One of those grants was specifically funded for the Willamette Falls Legacy Project support for the planner that Tony talked about.
Okay. So I would just say for future endeavors, we should talk about in the future about making sure that the priorities that are set for projects for the planning department can be funded, and that we're not doing projects based on grants only, because sometimes the grants are the tail wagging the dog as opposed to the dog wagging the tail. And that's all I'm just going to say about that.
Anybody else on planning?
Yes, quick question. Is the comprehensive plan update, is it dependent on grant opportunities, or are we planning to do that regardless of incoming grant revenues?
I didn't see it anywhere.
We would, I understand from the director that we are seeking grants to support that process, and
So
that
if
it
we
is an
don't get the
intention to move
grants?
forward.
Okay. It's contingent?
Contingent on grants.
It is contingent on grants. We did set aside a small amount of money to act as a match or to help us get started in grants. I'll be talking to you more about this grant in the next couple of weeks. But the revenues didn't show up in the budget since we don't have the grants yet.
Could you just say that again, Tony?
So we're applying for grants to fund the comprehensive plan work.
Okay,
And so
perfect.
some of that will come from Oregon Department of Transportation TGM grants, some will come from DLCD. So it's a mix and a match. We are bringing forward to the commission probably in the first meeting in June, resolution of support for one type of a grant that would potentially help fund some of this. But then in this budget, we did not include any of the grant revenue since we do not have it yet. But we did include some minor funding that can be used as a match when we write those grants. They look for a certain percentage match relative to the total grant.
All right, I just want to be prepared when I get approached by Commissioner Mahoney in aisle 5 at Fred Meyer when he asked me about did we allocate money for comprehensive plan update? And I can say yes, some, and we're applying for some grants. And again, I hope the grants are very specific to the general nature of a comprehensive plan update, but not piecemeal. I don't really want to see that.
I think, and I'm sorry, I hate to be the wet blanket, but the nature of the grant funding with the limitations, it is a lot of work to piece together. Some are very specific, and some offer that more broad latitude on how they're done. And it's very competitive with limited funding available.
Yeah, we need to talk to DLCD about doing periodic, they used to have grants for periodic review, and I don't think they're doing that much anymore.
That is correct.
Okay, anything else? Moving on.
The Building Division, which, while housed in the Community Development Department, operates under dedicated funding that requires revenues generated by permits to be utilized for Building Division expenses only. The Building Division also achieved savings in canceled lease payments due to the relocation along with the Planning Department. Please see pages 85 through 87. Any question on building? This one, Mike's got this and Laura have got this department running pretty well.
Questions?
I guess I have one real quick one. Revenues generated by permits fund this. Where, if there are any excess revenues from permits, where do they go?
Needs to stay in the ending fund balance contingency. It's a dedicated fund.
It's
because
dedicated, so they all have to go there.
Correct. It can only be spent on building-related expenditures.
Okay.
Are any of the funds in the Building Division being utilized for any outreach in terms of talking to the people who are doing construction about doing partnering with Clackamas County for more recycling of construction materials, doing education outreach about that sort of thing? Because, again, we cannot keep affording to throw stuff in the landfill and getting it hauled over to Arlington. So I'm just wondering if there's any, because I know they go to training, so is there anything we're doing as a community to try to promote better building practices, so to speak?
I know that they've started the community, well, several years ago, they started the Community Development Stakeholder Group, which meets, I believe, monthly with building industry, architects, engineers, That could be an opportunity. Obviously, Laura's here and has heard this. That might be an opportunity to coordinate with Clackamas County with waste recycling to see if they would be willing to come in and talk to the builders, or we can reach out and see what programs are available.
I know they have them.
Yep.
Great, thank you.
Moving on.
Engineering, without John Lewis. This will be fast. Engineering is located on pages 93 through 95.
Ouch.
Yeah, it's
Were we gonna
responsible
talk
for the
about
planning,
that?
design, construction, and database mapping for Oregon City public infrastructure, including capital improvement projects, development projects, and asset management. Last year, an additional engineer was added to assist with the increase in transportation capital projects.
Stop. Where are we at? Are we in Public Works or are we in engineering?
You skipped Public Works.
I think we skipped public.
General, Public Works General.
That's why it went so fast.
Engineering is the first division
The
under
first
Public
division
Works.
under
Sorry,
Public Works.
moving on to Public Works, starting with engineering. Thanks.
Page 93.
Subsection 1.
All right, go ahead.
Last year, an additional engineer was added to assist with the increase in transportation capital projects. The biennium funds the position for the full year. Additional funds have been allocated to contracted engineers to assist with the upcoming Beaver Creek project.
Questions?
Despite the addition of another engineer, our personnel services number goes down for the next biennium?
Yeah, there has been some reallocation of staff. We hired the transportation engineer, and that's coded that to the transportation fund. And we more accurately allocated the senior staff, John Lewis, and the city engineer to those utility divisions. Thank you, that was a good catch.
Okay. On to transportation.
The Transportation Fund accounts for two organizational units, transportation and pavement maintenance. General transportation expenditures, including staffing, materials, and services for general maintenance and construction, are funded by gas tax revenues. The pavement maintenance fees fund the annual pavement repair and roadway reconstruction contracts. These revenues and expenses are kept segregated for accountability. Materials and services include the pavement maintenance program, which includes $830,000 of contracted services and materials. It also contains $316,000 for running the elevator, which is funded by a transfer from the general fund. Capital outlay includes $1.6 million for traffic signal installations, turn lanes, and pedestrian improvements, $5.3 million for Malala Avenue Phase 2, $2.3 million for roadway reconstruction, and $100,000 for other miscellaneous capital items. Are there any questions concerning the transportation?
Commissioner Smith?
I don't get the feeling that the stairs are going to be open anytime soon.
Hopefully they will.
Okay, but have we budgeted money for the next year or two in case the stairs are closed for a year or closed for the later hours of the elevator? Are we prepared for that if it?
Just give me an overview of exactly what's going on there.
So we had a rock fall on this staircase about halfway down. It did some damage to the rail on the inside or cliff side of the staircase. So we contracted with a firm that came out. They do a lot of the work that you see Multnomah Falls along ODOT Highway, where they're scaling, breaking loose rock. Potentially you're putting up the metal cage, the fencing, to essentially try to stop some of that rock fall from getting down the street. The method that we're looking at, essentially, we came in with about 250 hay bales to try to pop the rock that is the one of issue out and into the rock while protecting the staircase. So that'll happen this week. So when everything goes well, we'll get it cleaned up and have it back open. We have not gone and created a contingency for if it does not work
Okay, so
yet.
because we think it's going to be fixed fairly quickly.
We think we're going to address the issue.
And we don't have any real plan right now to install anything permanent on the bluff?
When the rock scalers were looking at it, you could move the rock just by hand. So whether it was to try to screen it, bolt it, there was just a worry that it's gonna go at some point, so let's just get it out.
It's just throwing money after.
So is there a systemic problem farther than this one rock?
We had them look adjacent. They didn't do the whole thing.
Right.
But they looked in the general area, and we think that this is the issue that we need to deal with.
Okay. You satisfied?
Yeah, I mean, I just think if we get to a point, and this is not necessarily a budget, but if we get to a point where we're like, this is a huge issue and we need to install stuff, and, I mean, I assume that's gonna come
It would.
to another level to us to deal with if, okay, but it doesn't sound like I left the last meeting not sure if we're gonna have the stairs closed for a year or 2 years or whatever, but it sounds like we know more. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioner Smith. And just to add clarification, we have in the budget the specific elevator operation that for the norm, we could come to the commission at a later point and say we need a budget
extra if
adjustment.
we.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those are under acts of God.
Any other questions on transportation?
Which is why we maintain an ending fund balance.
Right.
So that we have the money to deal with something that's an emergency. Moving on.
Okay, the water utility division operates and maintains the city's potable water distribution system, including distribution and system maintenance. The source of potable water supply for the city is surface water from the lower Clackamas River, which is drawn and treated by the South Fork Water Board. South Fork is a wholesale water supplier that is equally owned by Oregon City and the city of West Lynn. The current budget includes approximately $4.2 million in water purchases from South Fork, an increase in consumption, and a 4% annual rate increase. Totals about $868,000 from the prior biennium, and approximately $6.9 million in capital projects, including pipe replacement and upgrade projects. This is on budget pages 101 through 104. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
No questions, but I do want to state for the public that South Fork is one of the only municipalities in the state that is debt-free. So, we've been running South Fork pretty darn good. Questions? Moving on. Wastewater.
Pages 105 through 108. The wastewater utility division maintains the city's wastewater collection system. The city's wastewater system includes 14 pump stations and 135 miles of both force main and gravity pipes, all of which serve over 10,900 customers. Once the wastewater is collected, it's treated by the Tri-City Service District. The proposed budget includes $11 million of pass-through payments for wastewater treatment and system development charges received from city customers and remitted to Tri-City. The budget also continues funding for the infiltration and inflow reduction investigation program, including TV inspection, smoke testing, public education, and public policy. Total capital outlays of $5.7 million include $4.9 million in pipeline renewal and replacements. Are there any questions concerning wastewater budget and expenditures?
Not a question, but a statement. I think that we've spoken about the rate differential to Wes before. I still believe the city commission is committed to telling the county that that's the wrong way to deal with things. So I think the commission's going to have a discussion about whether we're going to stop paying the rate differential of Clackamas County. But any other pertinent questions on wastewater?
Have we had a discussion with Clackamas County about that?
Only a billion times.
Okay, well, we can try $1 billion in one.
We do have a new county.
We got a different commission there now, and
Well,
they're open to listening.
that's funny. Okay, we'll move on. Stormwater.
The Stormwater Utility Division maintains the city's stormwater management system, which includes conveyance, flood control, and pollution remediation and reduction. The division is completing its master plan update. Upon completion of the plan, a rate study and system development charge analysis will be completed to determine the needs of the system. Currently, the budget funds pipe replacements on Harding Boulevard and Scatter Canyon, as well as pipe upgrades on 12th Street.
Where is Scatter Canyon?
Behind the cemetery where you scatter your ashes.
Oh, jeez, that's what.
Is that really what it is?
Really?
I don't know. I know it's behind the cemetery. I don't know if that's why it's called Scatter Canyon.
It could be.
Like when it's shot around, like
I'm sure it
1820.
is.
I've never heard of it, so.
Wow, that's amazing.
All right.
Questions on stormwater?
Moving on.
Oh, that's what she said.
System development.
Before we get to systems development charge, I have a general public works question.
Yes.
It was mentioned earlier that there's going to be some tracking software for the Parks Community Services Division. Is it possible that that tracking software could also be used by Public Works? And what I'm getting at is that we have a lot of benches, boulder signs, monuments, things that the public or other entities have given to the city, and we don't have any way to track it. And the reason that I bring this up is that former operations manager Martin Montalvo mentioned this at a neighborhood meeting, and we thought it was a great idea. And we volunteered, some of us volunteered to help John kind of assess what's out there. So I'm thinking, for instance, the monument that's in the promenade to Lila and I can never remember his name.
Oh, yes, the Gardeners.
The Gardeners. We've got a McLaughlin neighborhood sign sitting at the top of Singer Hill. We had some signs that were in Carnegie Park. We have new signs there, and they should be somehow documented that we know where they came from. We know that they're there so that nothing ever happens to all this stuff. So if there's a way that software can be utilized by both departments, I think it would be to the benefit of us to make sure we know what's where. I didn't see anything in this budget about
Thank you, Chair,
software.
and thank you, Commissioner McGriff. That's an excellent point, and so maybe that could be something that John Lewis could address at some point, talking about asset management software and work order software, which Public Works does have. They have Lucity programs and things like that, and the park software specifically to tracking the cemetery plots and things like that, which is a little bit different, but your point is well taken, and I think that would be some good information to share about how we track all of our assets.
Well, this is something we talked about at the retreat.
We have talked about it, and we've addressed it effectively each time. I think, they do. We talked about whether there's a work order system, and that would be included in the enterprise resource planning system. To which my response was no. Public Works already has a work order system, which is called Lucity, and it's very effective. I think the question is just whether that would be something.
Parks use that system?
What's specific about their software is tracking cemetery plots and everything. So rather than having a big book that's kind of subject to risk, having software for that. Can the two be combined? Well, I already asked the team back here to make a note to talk with the crew about it.
Yeah,
So-
Mark said there was a specific software that you can use to track that.
That's a great point. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's more software out there than cards got little pills. Anyway.
I believe it.
So, quick question on deferred maintenance.
You're still under Public Works?
I'm on stormwater.
Oh, stormwater.
We're going backwards?
I thought we were on stormwater.
We're on stormwater.
Okay, sorry.
I feel like I've heard John Lewis say this multiple times. I'm on page 109 in the general section. The last sentence of the paragraph says, while revenues are sufficient to cover operations, there is a growing amount of deferred maintenance due to this funding shortage. And I'm wondering, how many biennia has this been going on as far as our increase in this deferred maintenance backlog? And do we have any estimate on how much that maintenance backlog is right now?
I do not, but we can make a note and bring that back.
And the only reason I bring this up is because I feel like we've kind of put ourselves in a pickle with parks, deferred maintenance, and we're trying to tackle that one. And I'm just wondering how long this line item is going to continue to sit here before we realize that we need to make some movement on this. And so is it on the agenda sometime to start talking about this?
Yeah, Chair and Commissioner Lyle-Smith, so some of the things that we've talked about in the past is Public Works has been really diligent in the last 5 years or more since John Lewis came on board. They have, I used to joke that it had been a decade since they had done a master plan for sewer, but they got it done. And a decade since they did water, but they got it done. So the stormwater master plan is the last on the list, and Public Works has been working on that diligently. And so that's where they're putting together what needs to take place, what the deferred maintenance is. And there'll be a question to the commission about maybe rates or SDCs related to that as well. So to your question, that'll be addressed.
Yep, so goal 5, stormwater master plan, update the stormwater master plan, capital improvement plan, and complete a rate study and system development charge analysis for the city's stormwater system, adopt the appropriate SDC to implement the project identified in the master plan. So it's one of the last ones that we're getting to.
Yeah, okay.
For infrastructure.
That's actually a brilliant question too, that makes me think about the earlier question in that there's utility fees on the bills for stormwater.
Right.
Is it adequate? water, wastewater. There isn't one for parks.
Right.
And there's a limit on that cap. It's just an interesting fact. But
So will
probably for another day.
will all of these master plans, how many of these particular pieces of public works have a deferred maintenance? Is stormwater the only one, or is?
Well, you have
The other
we've
ones
talked
are
about water. We have the,
Right.
you
We
know,
have
so we
water.
have a deferred
Right.
status there.
So will we tackle all of this when we do this SDC analysis and?
Probably individually. I don't think we'd run up stormwater and water at the same time. We would probably focus, they'd probably be staggered.
Each utility runs through a cycle, and I think this is good for the commission to consider too. And from a financial perspective of the utilities, wastewater is relatively healthy. Wastewater is relatively healthy, sewer. And that's actually in large part through some tough decisions commissions made when we went through the moratorium issue when it wasn't healthy.
Right.
And there were a couple of rate hikes, which we didn't want to do, but we did address those. And so we talk about wastewater being kind of that status quo. Water is limited by some charter requirements to only hold, to hold the fees. And stormwater has been kind of, stormwater's in a little bit of bad shape, but that's the one they're working on. So we'll be coming back to the commission to talk about that.
Well, and part of the key is, especially when we're talking about older neighborhoods, especially McLaughlin, Kenema, and some of those, is we've got pipes in the ground that are 75 or 100 years old. And, we're working on plans to fix all that stuff, but, pipes in the ground are expensive.
Oh, I know,
It's a national problem, yeah.
I just feel like with the parks, we sit here and we go, how do we not know we have this deferred maintenance number? And how did it get this big? And so I'm just wondering how many biennium this line item has been in here that we've just that we're letting this deferred maintenance. And if it's gonna be tackled this biennium and we're gonna get numbers on it, that's fine. It was just one of those, I'm like, this narrative sounds very familiar, of we're adding, to our deferred maintenance. And I'm like, well, how many of our programs are adding deferred maintenance backlogs?
I think the one difference in my mind from parks to the other utilities deferred maintenance is that there truly is a policy discussion about what rates do you want to apply as a commission and how quickly do you want to tackle the problem. It has a revenue source versus parks deferred maintenance is tough because it's competing against a very limited pot with a lot of demand on it.
Okay, moving on. System development.
System development charges, SDCs are charged as part of the permitting process for new development. The purpose of the charges is to fund future capacity increasing projects as required due to growth. Oregon City imposes and expands system development charges according to Oregon law. As mentioned previously, funds are maintained separate for each of the 5 divisions collecting system development charges. And you can see some of the significant investments that we'll be making through the system development charges, Myers Road Extension, Malala, Transportation, System Plan Implementation Projects, Woods Memorial Park, Filbert Run, land purchases.
Do those monies for Filbert Run and Woods is that a full funding of those parks?
Woods Memorial is a full funding with a combination of SDCs and existing parks grant that they receive. Filbert Run, we're applying for a grant, so that would be not the total park project, or would that be?
About $300,000 worth of park grant funds.
On top of the 1.6, so it'd be 1.9 total?
Correct.
So these are the SDC investments.
Okay.
Is that land purchase slated to particular properties, or is it just a placeholder item?
It is one.
Or one that we've talked about?
It is one that is talked about, but not final.
Okay. Questions?
Just about Mountain View Cemetery. They acquired a 1-acre park property for expansion, which is great. Are there any future expansions on the horizon? I mean, I hate to say it, are we filling it up? Sorry.
We're dying.
Yeah, well, I don't mean that. I don't mean it in that way. But are we planning for?
You want to go ahead and take away?
Sorry, it sounds morbid no matter whatever's going to come out of my mouth. Sorry, I don't want to.
Thank you. So yes, we did acquire additional property, about a 1-acre piece, as part of the Mountain View Cemetery. We are looking at future development of some niche space for cremations, as well as looking at developing that piece to house kind of more of a welcoming environment for families eventually. So we'll have the current park or cemetery operations center as families come in, have probably a little bit more of a conference room space, so there will be some probably expansion of the footprint of the current building, but then also some possible...
At the cemetery?
At the cemetery.
Okay.
And then possibly some whatever room is not left off will be reincorporated into the newer sections of the cemetery property for burials.
Great, thank you. Great.
What is the location of the Woods Memorial Park?
Glen Oak Road and High School Lane, just north of Glen Oak, just
Your neighborhood.
Across from the
right across from the bus barn.
Transportation Department, School
It was
District.
just called Glen Oak Park for the longest time.
It got renamed to the Tyrone S. Woods.
Woods.
Right.
Any other questions in this section? Other.
The Community Facilities Fund includes the public building projects we've discussed, the Public Works and Parks Operations Center, the Police Municipal Court Building, and a small set aside for future library facility capital needs from savings on the expansion project. Each project funding is restricted and segregated. The total budget for each project is shown on this slide. Additionally, the community safety advancement fee utility charges are deposited into this fund and transferred to a debt service fund for the payment of principal and interest on those bonds. Any questions concerning community facilities funds that have been set aside?
Okay, move on.
Equipment replacement. Page 122, Public Works and participating departments evaluate the city's fleet to recommend new or replacement vehicles based on need, age, maintenance costs, and safety concerns. Departments make annual transfers into this fund to accumulate savings for current and future purchases. The proposed budget is $7.9 million and includes $1.3 million in purchases and $5.6 million in ending reserves. Any questions concerning fleet?
I'm just curious, I mean, do you sell them off, or what do you do when they're out of commission? I mean,
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee Member Gordon. So we do sometimes do auctions. We can also, for some of the vehicles, like a police vehicle, they can use them in special ways to do tactical operations and things like that.
but I mean, you do sell them.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure if I could, I'll make a really short comment that we talk about a lot about deferred maintenance and whether the city's doing things well. You know, I like to put a positive spin on some things when we're doing it well. So in the Community Facilities Fund, City Manager and Library Director Cole had identified some of that funding to just put a little money away for deferred maintenance on the library facility in the future, so that we won't have that problem with deferred maintenance. And the Equipment Replacement Vehicle Fund is another thing the city does effectively financially, which is setting aside a little money for future replacement of vehicles and equipment so that we're not surprised with, oh my goodness, we have to buy this. So these are two ways that we kind of get ahead of that deferred issue.
At least we don't have to buy fire trucks anymore.
Absolutely good.
Right, yeah. They're fun. So I am hoping that, I'm sure that they've already thought about this, I'm hoping that in the future that we add in some all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive vehicles for the police department, because I really don't like to see them out there trying to chain up when we've got, you know, the rare times we have snow episodes, but I'm telling you.
Yeah, they are.
They're all four-wheel drive.
Yes.
They've done that.
All the police cars are four-wheel drive?
I think you'd probably have to go to spikes.
Yes.
Awesome.
There we go.
Any other questions on this?
Other funds and internal service funds. Staff in the Utility Customer Service Fund provide utility billing, collection, and general customer service. Staff in the Fleet Services Fund maintain the city's fleet, excluding police vehicles. Both departments are funded by chargers to the department that is using their services. So here we have Fleet Services and Utility Customer Service.
Okay, where we at?
Other funds, debt service, the Public Employees Retirement System, unfunded actuarial liability bonds were issued by the city in 2005 in the amount of $17 million to fund its PERS liability. These bonds mature in 2028. And then the city issued $16 million of voter-approved full faith and credit obligation bonds dated June 5th, 2018 to provide a new police and municipal court facility. Revenues to pay the $2.2 million in principal and interest come from a transfer
of the Community Safety Advancement Fee, utility fees designated for such purposes. Any questions concerning the debt repayment?
No.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, in summary, the proposed budget is balanced, funds core services and the city commission goals, and there are no increases to fees beyond inflationary adjustments, and the tax rate remains at 4.409 per thousand for both years of the biennium. Thank you for your time and patience tonight, and be happy to answer any other questions.
Okay, hang on, what? Go ahead, Mr. Griffin.
There was questions.
Huh?
I thought it was question time. You had your mallet before you.
Yeah, I do.
We still have a couple of agenda items, sir.
Well, we have a public hearing.
Oh, yes, sure.
So,
Oh my God, that's.
let's take 10, we'll come back, and we'll do the rest of it. So we'll come back to order. The next thing we have on the agenda is this the state revenue sharing public hearing? So is there, prior to this, is there any discussion about the general budget?
I had one question I wanted to ask about the money that had been set aside for building a new public works building
Yes.
that had been coming off of the utility bill. Has that ceased? What happened to that money?
You mean the collection?
So kind of just like an overarching, and then you can ask for clarification. So probably 10 or more years ago, the prior Public Works Director started the concept of,
Yes.
well, let's use some of our revenues and start to save for this operations facility.
That's what I'm talking
You
about.
need a place to work, right? Your two choices are start saving a long time ago, which was a wise choice, or take out some debt and build it moving forward. And so the decision was made at that time to start saving. So that is included within the existing utility revenue. And in order to pay for that project, we've got a couple more years to go. So we want to get moving on it because we have this great opportunity with First Street, right?
Exactly.
So we did get a little creative, but in a very legal way with under state law, where we created an interfund loan. So we sent some money over there, cash, to be able to work on the project. And there's going to be a couple of more years we're going to be saving those funds and repaying that loan to make that project happen. Then I think the exciting part is probably 3 years from now, when there's a little bit more money infused, which is probably your point, Committee Member Gifford, a little more money infused into some deferred maintenance and other projects, because now you've got your building constructed.
I remember when we instigated the CSAFE fund, that the promise was that when that bond is paid off, that fee goes away.
Correct.
And I'm wondering, was a similar promise made when the Public Works fee was attached to the utility bill?
That's a great question, Committee Member Gifford. It's a completely different situation, because in this case, for the police facility, we identified a specific fee for the purpose of the building, made the promise to the ratepayers that as soon as the costs are paid for that building, that fee will go away. Different situation from utility funds. We kind of talked about that difference between the discretionary and the dedicated, where utility funds say, and it's a common accounting practice where you say, it's called an enterprise fund. It's supposed to fund its entire operations. It's not general property taxes that are discretionary. It's a fully funded operation, so your rate should be able to pay for your place where you work, your vehicles, your people, all those kinds of things. And at that time, there was no promise made. It was just a decision that said, we have to make a choice. We know our operations center isn't going to be functioning much longer. We better start setting aside some money. There's, as we've talked about, for deferred maintenance and what these pipes that need to be replaced. Eventually, it'll be nice to have that money not being set aside anymore, so it can go into some of those projects, but there's a huge need.
So this was a rate increase?
There was a decision to use the existing rate revenue structure to put a little money aside over many years for a future building.
So once we build the building, then the money that we were saving to go there then goes back to the utility or the public works.
To fix the pipes.
To do other things.
Correct. Thank you, Chair.
So you could think about it's coming from water, sewer, storm.
Right.
Right, so it would go back into that.
So it was
much
never-
less
so it
into
was
the
never
calculation.
earmarked-
One at a time.
It was never earmarked specifically as a building fund.
No, and I wouldn't advise that that would be the case. I mean, it makes sense for you to save. This is eventually, if you want to buy a new car, you might want to start saving some money out of your monthly revenue to do that. That's what the Public Works Department did across all of the funds in a fair and equitable way. There wasn't, there have been budget committees and commissions over the last dozen years that have approved for that to happen. So it's all official and approved.
Oh, I'm not doubting that.
But nobody came in and said, we're going to create a special rate for this. It's just part of the operation. And I think that's some of the confusion out there sometimes is, yes, you do have to have a building to house your staff and your trucks. And so it's just part of the operation. I appreciate you clarifying that because some folks have asked about that before.
Okay, thank you.
Dennis, question?
Thank you.
Anything else?
Yeah, I have one quick question. So Tony, you mentioned earlier this evening that maybe it was the current biennium, we spent like $175,000 roughly to some nonprofit organizations like DOCA, Willamette Falls Legacy or Trust, or which one of those groups, the Locks. Is there a line item for those things in this biennium as assuming a continued thing, maybe just with more formal agreements, or is that still on the table as a?
So there is a line item for Willamette Falls Trust. There is a line item for Downtown Oregon City Association. The locks was pretty minimal. I think it was like 7,000.
Yeah.
And so I don't know that there's a specific line item for the locks, and I forget what the heritage area was.
You nailed it, City Manager. Absolutely. So under the general government budget, they don't each have their own line, but there's sort of the community programs, and we've got the locks in there for the 7. You said that perfectly. And the DOCA payment is in the economic development budget.
So is there discretion in there, like where Commissioner Smith was saying earlier, if we wanted to come back and talk about this,
I think that
the marijuana tax conversation?
This is the exact conversation. So when I was saying, not only is it, what are the criteria?
Right.
It's how do we do, because we're kind of, it feels like we're creating this program.
Right.
Right, and so when does that program happen? Do we take all applications in November and we make a decision by February to get into the budget? Or is it a 2-year, or is it just come in? So there's some nuts and bolts, I think, that the commission and we need to work out on how to fund it. But right now, we've budgeted it.
Okay.
That does not mean that the commission authorizes me to spend it.
Okay.
Right, I mean, so those, DOCA's IGA is coming up July, or their agreement's July 1. You know, the trust, I forget, they're somewhere in that same July, August timeframe as well.
So we're coming up on needing to finish.
So we're going to have to make some decisions
Okay.
what to do with those.
Okay.
Well, and speaking, knowing that DOCA is building their summer events based on that budget.
I know.
So, I mean, we're at summer. So they're expecting that money to be there. And if we somehow a month from now say no, that's a whole nother issue, but I just want people to know.
You're also not talking about this budget cycle.
I know.
Well, it'd be July 1. It would be the
Yeah.
first day of this budget,
Yeah.
new budget cycle. It's historically how it's happened.
Yeah.
Because that's when the money came due on the EID.
I know that they were waiting for an answer from when they came to us several months ago, and they still don't know.
I don't think they should be expecting that money, because I remember the conversations at the commission hearing. It was about, get your house in order, formalize your agreement, we'll go this cycle, but for the next cycle, we have to have a discussion before we proceed further. And I specifically remember that discussion from a commission meeting.
Yeah, and I'll say this again, I know at least the commissioners have heard it before, that when we give money, taxpayer money, to private organizations, it should be, excuse me, it should be seed money. And it shouldn't last forever. It should be a 2 or 3 year thing to get an organization up and running, and then they should become independent and do their stuff. Now, we don't give any money to the chamber.
Right.
We don't give any money to the Oregon City Business Alliance. We don't give money to the Lions or the Kiwanis. So my question has always been, now we're going on 10 years of doing this for the Downtown Oregon City Association, and they failed pretty dramatically in getting their EID reapproved because they didn't work collaboratively with everybody that was down there to find a way to make it all work. So I'm, while I'm willing to do this one more budget cycle, we've got to figure out a way, and that's why we had Tony go back and look at this and develop some policies so that we can go, okay, you can have this for 3 years and then you're done, and so you better get your stuff together and make sure that you have the ability to continue your organization once we've, taken you from seedling.
I just want to emphasize that it feels like a grant program. I'm just going to show my cards here a little.
Right.
It feels like a grant program, and they're, other than what we currently do in funding, we're not allocating additional funding to some pot of money that's going to go to grant. We do 4 right now. We identify what happens if we get 10.
Right.
And I'm just, so that's some of the things that we're struggling with internally in putting this together.
Well, and it makes me wonder if this request by Brian Shaw, which is a very good request from a nonprofit organization, like, would their application be more suitable or be suitable for like the Community Enhancement Grant Program? And did he put an application in for that? I think it may check a lot of those boxes, and so I don't know. It just occurred to me that maybe that was another alternative for that.
Well, there's also a question.
Which is a grant program that's for the community.
There's also a question as to whether that group is actually a nonprofit. And
Okay.
because if they aren't, we can't give them money.
Right.
I would like to build on that a little bit. One difference is that a grant program, specifically, I echo the mayor's comment about how grants should be used as seed money to get something started. But the marijuana tax is an ongoing tax, an ongoing revenue that will be received. And I don't know that the money has to go necessarily to the organization as long as it provides the service that organization is asking for. And because it's generated from the activity it just seems like the most natural thing to do. It's different to me than a grant.
So this is a policy question that we're going to have time to talk about later.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that anybody wants to talk about as far as the budget in general?
I just wanted to say about DACA is that currently, from what I see, they're acting as your tourism department, pretty much. So until you have that tourism in place and stuff, you don't want to mess with that because that's going to really slow things down. And then when you get a tourism coordinator in, they're gonna have to build it up again. So I just wanted to put that.
Well, we're not talking about defunding DOCA in this cycle.
Okay, good.
What we're saying is by the time we get to the next biennial budget, we need to have policies and procedures in place to make those decisions as commission.
Okay.
Is that a fair statement, Mr. Compton?
I think I love that statement because what I had heard last time was
kick it down the road.
To bring forward the policy for the commission to consider before we fund any of these groups again. So if there is some flexibility, maybe this is a policy discussion for the commission, because I do worry about implementation timing and July 1 is going to be here quick for 2 organizations, potentially more. And how do we want to handle that? So I
think we're all in agreement that we're going to let it go through this budget cycle, and we're going to use this 2-year time frame to develop those policies and procedures. But we also have to have that deal. It's not really an IGA with DOCA.
It kind of is. I think it kind of is like an IGA. It is.
Well, but it's not an IGA because they're not a government. So,
But you can do MOUs and IGAs. And
I'm going to comment on that.
Go ahead.
I'm simply going to say this. I think DOCA has done a lot of good things and can continue to do a lot of good things and be very effective. I do want to just tell you that at the last meeting, we've been operating under a temporary memo of understanding for over 10 years. And I realize we've had a disconnect with their management, with Jonathan leaving and all. And we told them we'll go this time, the last time, but come before us and have your house in order. Have a formalized agreement. Tell us what your deliverables are, and let's proceed on that. So I don't know that we necessarily agreed to do it through the biennium. I'm not going to stand on it one way or the other. It's just, let's get the house in order. Let's get the agreement formalized. Here's deliverables. Here's what we'll do. Here's the city's obligation to you. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
I will pass that on at the board meeting that I will be attending.
Yeah, because another thing too is if you did not fund it, then it's going to cause, well, I mean, yeah, the businesses won't be as available to your new tourism stuff. So.
I don't want to kick a dead horse.
Yeah, no.
But is there because that's different than what I walked away with a month and a half ago when they presented.
Right.
And we asked if we should come back with an IGA, and I was told no IGA until we have a policy in place. So just a little bit of clarification, because this is different. Not that I completely support this approach. I think some of my gray are turning brown instead of the other way around, but this gives us more time to, I think, thoughtfully do that. But the second part of that question is, does that apply to the trust as well?
To the trust.
Well, Emmett Falls Trust, we have a yearly IGA, MOU with them for our investment in the trust for their philanthropic activities.
Right.
So there were the
Well, I
four
think
that we
there-
have identified right now.
I think that the difference between DOCA and the other groups is the other groups all are formalized, either a government agency or a conglomeration of government agencies, or it's a 501c. I think trust is C6 or is it C3? Anyway,
They can split it also.
those are actual, government organizations of one kind or another, versus DOCA, which is totally a private nonprofit.
And that's great. What I had heard was everyone's competing at once under this new policy regardless. So I think this helps if everyone's in agreement that that's the direction we're taking.
Well, I agree with what the mayor said. I think that Commissioner O'Donnell still has a concern, but if you're okay with, if the rest of the commission's okay with this next cycle, and then, but I think you're hesitant to do that, or are you okay with that?
Only because they had an obligation to formalize it. Operating for over 10 years under a memo of understanding is, and they indicated a willingness to come back. In fact, when we had the first meeting a year ago, they were going to accomplish that in a matter of weeks. And now this last time we had them in front of us, they understood that they had to do something similar to that. So I'd like to see an effort by them to do it, but I'm not going to stand in the way of funding, only simply because of the good things they provide.
Well, if you had gotten, originally you were going to have the tourism coordinator start in December. Now, if that had happened, I would be, my thought personally would be a little different. But because you didn't and it was longer, you don't want to have to reinvent any wheels.
Okay, this horse is dead.
It's not, let me just say, they are a 501c3, DOCA is.
Okay.
They are legally a nonprofit. So, you were talking about that they weren't, but yes, they
No,
are.
he was talking.
Oh, I think we were talking about OC
the trust.
together.
He was trying to figure out the trust.
OC together.
Talking about OC together.
It's not.
So I don't think we've warned any of these other groups, if they've all got renewals coming up in the next couple of months. I don't think we've told them. We haven't had conversations with them that I'm aware of, like we did with DOCA, of saying, hey, we may not be renewing our commitment to you unless you come back and give us X, Y, and Z. I mean, with DOCA, we did have that conversation. So to be fair, I brought this line item up because I was trying to figure out, one, is it a line item and is it dedicated? Have we already kind of committed to that for this biennium? Sounds like we kind of have, and we haven't told any of them that we were potentially pulling it off the table or that they would be competing for funds. And if that's going to happen in the next couple of months without any warning, I don't know that that would be fair to them this time around, and while we work on our policy, that's just kind of my take. I was just wondering if that was committed, and is that the line item that we would be adjusting if we wanted to consider this marijuana tax, because it was kind of getting lumped in with this community grant conversation versus a revenue stream that we just want to take a piece of. So it's kind of a murky water, but that's kind of where I'm at on
Well, as
the.
far as the marijuana and OC together, I think there's a question about whether they are a 501c3 that we could actually give money to. And more importantly for me, I want to know what deliverables we're going to get from that. Because in my interactions with kids, and my kids and other people's kids as we raise them, the kids who were raised by parents who talked to them about drugs and had serious conversations were the kids that didn't do it. And the ones whose parents didn't do that aren't going to listen to some assembly speech at the high school, and that's going to stop them from smoking pot. So my question is, I want to know what, if we're going to do that, what do we get for it? How do they show us that the money that they're spending is doing what they say it will do? And so that's a much broader discussion that is not part of, at least in my opinion, is not part of the budget discussion tonight.
Right. I would agree with that.
What was not clear to me was whether the request was that 10% of those taxes should go to OC Together, or should 10% of those taxes go to education regarding marijuana, regardless of how it was spent.
Education.
Whether, if the idea was for education, it could come through our PIO, it could come through the city, it could be donated to the school system. There's a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to go, and I wouldn't want to make an issue about whether or not OC Together is a 501c3 or not, because I think the end result is we want education.
But if they're leading the charge, then they would need to take that up and provide us,
Right.
whether or not it's giving money to whoever. I mean, if they're the ones right now who is stepping up, then yeah, they need to provide us the deliverables.
The
and what are we-
connotation from
Yes.
all of the conversations that have been had with us is that money was going to go to OC Together to do
That's what I
their
thought, too.
programs.
Yeah.
And like I said, I think that's not a conversation that we're going to have at the budget hearing tonight.
Yeah, it's too
Right.
much tonight.
Yep.
So, any other general comments, questions, changes to the budget?
I think the city manager still needs to know what we are doing about downtown. And I think unless we hear anything else, we're going with the mayor's recommendation.
So if I'm hearing this correctly, for DOCA, I'm hearing that we are going to work on some type of clarification of services being provided. And if that's satisfactory, we will be funding them July 1 of this year. And then we will be funding Willamette Falls Trust. I'll have to go back and look at what the commitments were for the locks was so small. Honestly, I didn't dig it up because it was only 7,000.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't remember what the heritage area was. And see what those look like. But then, as part of that then is coming up with this program with criteria to be implemented. So there'll be a discussion about how to fund it, how to implement it, what the time frame is, that comes out of this by essentially in a year.
Yes, so that you have that spot on, and I'm not hearing any argument from the commissioner, so.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, then we're going to move on. I'm going to open the public hearing for the state revenue sharing. It's item 19-258. Mr. Parno.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. Oregon Revised Statutes 221-770 outlines how the state allocates state shared revenue, which is basically liquor tax allocated to cities based on a population formula. As part of the law, we're required to hold a public hearing on the uses of that money, so I want to tell you all what we're doing with it. In fiscal year end 2020, we have $405,000 allocated to general fund for general purposes. It's fungible. So that's police, parks, economic development, general government, and so forth. In 2021, we have $415,000 allocated for those same purposes. I'm required by law to say that. And then if anyone from the public has a comment, we're required to hear that. If there's no testimony, we can close the hearing, and the committee could move to approve the uses of state shared revenues as included in the budget.
Is there anyone here for public comment? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the 2019-2021 biennial budget?
Motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Approve the general operating tax rate of 4.409. Is there a motion?
Move.
And that's in each of the 2 years of the biennium.
Bob Bula. Moved by Commissioner McGriff, seconded by Mr. Gifford. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.
Thank you.